Rowan Blackmoor found the letter at dawn, her handwriting steady across paper that still smelled faintly of lavender. I cannot love a man who refuses to see me. I will not die here waiting for you to notice I'm already gone. His hand shook, something that hadn't happened since he was 12 and watched his father bleed out in the snow. The house was silent. The stables were empty, and for the first time in his 43 years, the most dangerous man in 3 territories felt something worse than rage. He felt fear. If you want to see how far a man can fall before he learns to stand differently, stay with me. Drop a comment with your city so I can see where this story reaches. Hit that like button. You're going to need something to hold on to. The Blackmore estate sat like a scar across the northern frontier. 7,000 acres of wind-scraped grassland, timber forests gone gray with winter, and a house built from stone that looked like it had been carved out of the mountain's anger. Rowan Blackmoor had inherited it at 19 when his father died badly, and he'd spent the next 24 years making sure everyone knew the name meant something that couldn't be challenged. He woke at 4:30 every morning. Same time, winter or summer. His boots hit the floor before his mind fully surfaced, muscle memory from 2 decades of discipline. The house was always cold. He preferred it that way. Cold kept you sharp. Lydia slept in the east wing, had for most of the 2 years since they married. He told himself it was practical, she needed quiet. He rose early. The arrangement made sense, but somewhere in the back of his mind, in a place he didn't visit often, he knew the real reason. Distance was easier than the alternative, easier than the possibility that she might ask for something he didn't know how to give. The marriage had been arranged by necessity, not romance. The Vale family controlled the water rights to the eastern tributaries. Rowan's land was rich in timber and grazing, but drought could kill it in 2 seasons. Lydia's father had been practical, almost cold about it. You need water. I need security for my daughter. Simple math. Lydia had been 23. Rowan, 41. He'd expected resistance. Instead, she'd simply nodded when her father explained the terms, her face unreadable. She'd worn gray to the wedding, a choice that felt deliberate, though he'd never asked why. The ceremony had been brief, efficient. Afterward, she'd moved her things into the east wing without prompting, as if she'd already understood the kind of marriage this would be. That first night, Rowan had stood outside her door for nearly 10 minutes, hand raised to knock. He'd lowered it eventually, told himself she needed rest, told himself there was time. 2 years later, he still hadn't figured out what to say. The estate ran like a machine because Rowan built it that way. Cattle operations, timber contracts, water management systems that his competitors studied and failed to replicate. He employed 67 people across the property, ranch hands, loggers, house staff, mechanics. Every one of them knew their role. Every one of them delivered. Rowan's reputation in the territory was specific, fair, but unforgiving. He paid well and on time. He expected competence. He didn't tolerate excuses, and he sure as hell didn't tolerate betrayal. Men who crossed him found their credit dried up across 3 counties. It wasn't cruelty. It was consequence. You run a tight ship, his foreman Marcus had said once, approval clear in his voice. Tight ships don't sink, Rowan had replied. What he didn't say, tight ships could still be empty. Lydia existed in the margins of that machine. She was there at dinner sometimes, quiet across the table. She managed the house staff with efficiency that surprised him. The place had never run smoother. But she moved through the estate like a ghost, present but not quite solid, never demanding space or attention. He told himself she was content. She had everything she needed, a home, security, resources. The library became hers by default. He'd walk past sometimes and see her there, surrounded by books, writing in journals with covers worn soft from handling. He never interrupted. It seemed like an intrusion. Once, about 8 months into the marriage, he'd found her in the kitchen at 2 a.m, flour dusting her hands, baking bread that filled the house with a smell that made his chest hurt, for reasons he couldn't name. Can't sleep? He'd asked from the doorway. She'd startled, then recovered. Sometimes I need to keep my hands busy. He'd nodded. Stood there awkwardly for a moment, trying to find words that wouldn't sound stupid. Smells good. Thank you. She'd gone back to kneading, and he'd understood the dismissal. He'd left her to it. That was their pattern. Proximity without connection. politeness without warmth, a marriage that functioned perfectly well as long as nobody expected it to be anything more. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday in October during the estate's quarterly review meeting. Rowan sat at the head of the long table in his office. Marcus and the other department heads arranged around him. Numbers on the screen, profit margins, resource allocation, the kind of meeting he could navigate in his sleep. Lydia appeared in the doorway halfway through, hesitant. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said quietly. "I wanted to discuss the—" "We're in the middle of something," Rowan cut her off, not looking up from the spreadsheet. "Can it wait?" Silence. Long enough that he finally glanced up. Her face was carefully blank. "Of course. My apologies." She'd turned and left before he could say anything else. Marcus had cleared his throat. "The timber contracts?" "Right," Rowan said, refocusing. "Where were we?" But something about the set of her shoulders as she walked away stuck with him through the rest of the meeting. He'd meant to find her after, but a crisis with the northern fence line had pulled him away, and by the time he got back to the house, it was past midnight. He'd stood outside her door again, raised his hand, lowered it. There was always tomorrow. The garden had been dead when Lydia arrived, a walled space behind the house, choked with weeds and the skeletal remains of plants that hadn't survived the previous owner's neglect. The first time Rowan saw her out there, she was on her knees in the dirt, pulling dead roots with bare hands. "You'll need gloves," he'd called from the porch. She'd looked up, shading her eyes against the sun. "I ordered some. They'll arrive next week." He'd nodded and gone inside. From his office window, he'd watched her work until the light failed, something fierce and focused in the way she attacked the dead ground. Over the months, she'd transformed it, somehow. Vegetables that actually grew in the harsh climate. Herbs that the cook started requesting by name. Flowers that he didn't know the names of, but that added color to a landscape that was usually just variations of gray and brown. She spent hours out there. Early mornings before the sun got brutal, late afternoons when the light went gold. He'd see her sometimes from the window, dirt on her knees, hair falling out of whatever she'd used to tie it back. And something about the scene made him feel like he was looking at a photograph, present but separated by glass. He never joined her, didn't know enough about plants to be useful, and she seemed to need the space. That's what he told himself. Winter came hard that year. Early snow in October. Temperatures that dropped fast and stayed low. The garden died back, and Lydia retreated further into the house, into the library, into rooms he didn't occupy. He'd pass her in hallways sometimes. She'd nod. He'd nod. They'd continue in opposite directions. The house staff noticed. He could tell from the careful way they didn't mention it, the slightly awkward pauses when both he and Lydia gave conflicting instructions about household matters. "Perhaps you should speak with Mrs. Blackmore directly," the housekeeper had suggested once, diplomatically. "I'm sure you can handle it," Rowan had replied. But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. He'd built a perfect estate and a hollow marriage, and he didn't know how to fix the latter without dismantling the control structures that made the former work. The breaking point came in December. Rowan had been in the north pasture all day, dealing with cattle that had broken through a fence during a storm. 16-hour day, the kind that left him bone-tired, encrusted with mud and ice. He'd come back to the house near midnight, boots caked with half-frozen dirt, every muscle aching. The kitchen light was on. Lydia sat at the counter, a cup of tea cooling in front of her, staring at nothing. "You're up late," he'd said, moving to the sink to wash his hands. "So are you." Her voice was flat, empty. He'd dried his hands, suddenly aware of how filthy he was. "Long day." "They all are." Something in her tone made him turn. She was looking at him now, really looking, and her eyes had a quality he'd never seen before. Not anger, worse than anger, resignation. "Lydia, do you even know what today is?" she asked. His mind went blank. Not a holiday, not a business deadline, not... "Our anniversary," she said quietly. 2 years. The words hit like a physical blow. He'd forgotten, completely. It hadn't even registered. He didn't have a defense. Didn't have an excuse that wouldn't make it worse. She nodded like his silence confirmed something. I made dinner, set the table, used the good china. Das Gis me poem, a bitter laugh. I felt stupid doing it, but I thought maybe... I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. The fence was... The fence? She repeated. Right. There's always something, isn't there? The fence, the contracts, the timber rights, the equipment that needs replacing. She stood, leaving the tea untouched. I understand that the estate is important. I do, but I can't. She stopped, shook her head. Can't what? He asked. Nothing. She moved toward the door. It doesn't matter. Lydia? Good night, Rowan. She left him standing in the kitchen, mud still on his boots, the weight of her disappointment somehow heavier than the 16 hours of physical labor. He should have followed her, should have made her finish the sentence, should have sat down and had the conversation they'd been avoiding for 2 years. Instead, he'd cleaned up, gone to his room, and told himself they'd talk in the morning when they were both less tired. The morning came and went. So did the next week, and the next month. They fell back into the pattern. Polite distance, careful avoidance. A marriage that looked functional from the outside, but felt like living in a house where all the rooms had been sealed off one by one. Lydia stopped trying to have dinner with him, stopped appearing in doorways with questions, stopped existing anywhere he might accidentally run into her. The garden stayed dormant under snow. And Rowan told himself everything was fine, that she just needed space, that the awkwardness would pass. He was good at lying to himself. 24 years of practice. It was Marcus who finally said something, in his indirect way. They were checking the equipment inventory in one of the barns, tablets in hand, going through the maintenance schedule for spring. Routine work that didn't require much thought. Sarah's been worried about Mrs. Blackmore, Marcus said casually, referencing his wife, who worked as the estate's head housekeeper. Rowan didn't look up from his tablet. Why? Says she seems, distant, more than usual. She's fine. Sarah doesn't think so. Marcus paused. Neither do I. Now Rowan did look up. You want to explain that? Marcus met his eyes, which was one of the reasons Rowan valued him. The man didn't back down from difficult conversations. I've worked for you for 12 years, watched you build this place into something that runs like clockwork. You're the most disciplined man I know. But discipline isn't the same as wisdom. Marcus shifted his weight. You can't manage a marriage like a timber contract, boss. People aren't assets. I'm aware of that. Are you? No challenge in the question, just honest curiosity. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to run your personal life the same way you run this estate. Keep everything controlled. Keep emotions out of it. Make it efficient. Rowan's jaw tightened. This isn't your business, Marcus. You're right. It's not. Marcus turned back to his tablet. But Sarah cares about Mrs. Blackmore, and I care about Sarah, so here we are. They finished the inventory in silence. That night, Rowan stood outside Lydia's door again. Raised his hand. This time, he knocked. Silence. He tried the handle. Locked. Lydia? His voice felt too loud in the quiet hallway. Nothing. He pressed his palm against the door, something close to panic rising in his chest. I want to talk. I'm tired, Rowan. Her voice came through the wood, muffled but clear. Please, not tonight. He should have insisted, should have said that they'd been putting it off too long, that they needed to have this out. Instead, all right, tomorrow then. Sure, she said, tomorrow. But they both knew it was a lie. February brought a cold snap that killed half the replacement calves and froze the pipes in the guest house. Rowan worked 20-hour days, managing the crisis, coordinating with vets, making decisions about which animals to try to save and which losses to accept. Lydia brought him coffee one afternoon, finding him in his office surrounded by paperwork and emergency contacts. You should eat something, she said, setting the cup on his desk. He looked up, registering her presence like someone waking from a dream. I will, soon. She nodded, started to leave. Lydia. She paused, not turning. Thank you, he said. For the coffee. You're welcome. She left before he could say anything else. He stared at the space where she'd been, trying to remember the last time they'd had a conversation longer than 3 sentences, trying to remember what her laugh sounded like, trying to remember if he'd ever heard it. The coffee went cold while he worked. March arrived with false promises of spring, 3 days of warmth that melted the top layer of snow before another storm buried everything again. Rowan found Lydia in the library one evening, the room dark except for a single lamp casting yellow light over her reading chair. "You'll ruin your eyes," he said from the doorway. She looked up, startled. "I didn't hear you." "Sorry, didn't mean to," he gestured vaguely. "I can go." "No, it's—" She closed the book. "It's fine. Did you need something?" The question felt loaded, like a test he didn't know how to pass. "Just wanted to see if you were all right," he said. "I'm fine." Automatic, rehearsed. "Lydia." "Really, Rowan, I'm fine, just tired." She stood, the book clutched to her chest like a shield. "I should get some sleep." She moved past him, and he caught the scent of lavender, her soap maybe, or something she used in her hair. It made him think of the garden, dormant under snow, waiting for a spring that might not come. "We should talk," he said to her, retreating back. She paused at the base of the stairs. For a long moment he thought she might agree, might turn around and finally say all the things that had been building between them. Instead, "Good night, Rowan." He listened to her footsteps fade up the stairs, then poured himself a drink he didn't want and didn't finish. The next morning, he woke to find the house too quiet. Something felt wrong immediately, though he couldn't name what. He went through his routine, boots, coffee, checked the weather reports, but the wrongness persisted, a buzzing under his skin. Sarah found him in the kitchen. "Have you seen Mrs. Blackmore?" "Not yet. Why?" "Her bed hasn't been slept in, at least not recently, and her riding gear is gone." "She went for a ride," Rowan said, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were wrong. Lydia didn't ride. Hadn't since she'd arrived. She told him once that she didn't trust horses. Sarah's face confirmed what he was thinking. "Sir, her clothes are gone. Most of them. And the suitcase from her closet." The world tilted slightly. He took the stairs to the east wing 2 at a time, Sarah trailing behind. Lydia's door was open. The bed was made with military precision, the kind of careful that felt final. The closet held a few dresses she never wore, formal things for events they never attended. Her personal items, the journals, the books with worn covers, the photographs she kept on the nightstand, gone. On the bed, a single envelope with his name in her careful handwriting. His hand shook as he opened it. Actually shook. Something that hadn't happened since he was 12 and watched his father bleed out in the snow. The letter was dated the day before. "Rowan, I'm writing this because I don't think I can say it to your face, and I need to say it. I need you to hear it, even though I know you won't really understand. I cannot love a man who refuses to see me, and I will not die here waiting for you to notice I'm already gone. You gave me everything except the one thing that mattered, you. Not your resources or your protection or your perfectly managed estate, just you. The person behind all that control and discipline. I thought maybe, given time, you'd let me in, that one day you'd knock on my door and actually come inside when I answered, that we'd have a conversation that lasted more than 5 minutes and didn't revolve around household logistics. I was wrong. I know you'll think this is dramatic, irrational, that I had everything I needed and I'm being ungrateful. You'll probably make a list of all the ways you provided for me, all the things you gave me access to, all the security you offered, and you won't be wrong about any of it. But you can't manage a heart the same way you manage cattle operations, Rowan. You can't schedule intimacy between budget meetings. You can't outsource emotional connection to your staff. I spent 2 years trying to find a door that wasn't locked, trying to be patient, trying to convince myself that this was enough, that I was asking for too much, that maybe this was just what marriage looked like in this world. It's not enough. And I'm done trying. I'm not telling you where I'm going because I don't want you to follow me out of obligation or pride. If you come after me, if you ever come after me, it needs to be because you actually want to try. Not to fix a problem or manage a crisis, but because you want me. The actual person. not the idea of a wife who fits neatly into your controlled world. I don't hate you. I don't even blame you, really. You are who you are, and maybe that's not your fault. But I can't disappear into the margins of your life anymore. I hope you find whatever it is you're protecting yourself from. I hope it was worth it. Lydia. He read it 3 times, then a 4th. The words didn't change. Sarah had disappeared, giving him privacy he didn't want. The house was silent around him, and for the first time in 2 years, he understood what Lydia had been living with. This crushing, suffocating silence. The absence of a person who was right there but might as well have been 1,000 miles away. He'd done this, built this. Every careful distance, every redirected conversation, every time he'd chosen work over connection because work was safe and connection was terrifying. The most dangerous man in 3 territories, afraid of his own wife. His chest hurt. Actually hurt, like something had cracked open that had been sealed for so long he'd forgotten it was there. The stables were empty of her favorite horse, the one gentle mare that would tolerate a nervous rider. Her saddle was gone. Based on the gear missing, she'd packed for distance, not a day trip. She had maybe 8 hours on him, maybe more if she'd left in the middle of the night. He should let her go. She'd made her choice. She'd written it clearly. I don't want you to follow me out of obligation or pride. The smart move, the controlled move, was to respect her decision, give her space. Maybe reach out in a few weeks when things had settled. Handle this like any other business negotiation. Rowan Blackmoor had built an empire on smart moves. He was in the saddle before he consciously made the decision. The letter shoved in his coat pocket, his second-best horse already saddled because standing still felt like dying. Marcus appeared from the barn, took one look at Rowan's face and asked, "What do you need?" "I need you to run things," Rowan said, "however long it takes." "Where are you going?" Rowan turned his horse toward the eastern trail, the one that led away from everything he'd built. "To stop being an idiot. Probably too late, but I'm going to try." He didn't wait for a response, just urged the horse forward, into country he didn't know, chasing a woman who had every reason to never look back. For the first time in 24 years, Rowan Blackmoor's control shattered completely. And somewhere beneath the fear, beneath the panic, there was something else. The faint, terrible hope that maybe it wasn't too late to learn how to be someone worth coming back to. The wind cut through his coat as he rode, and he didn't slow down. The eastern trail twisted through territory Rowan hadn't ridden in years. Dense pine forests that gave way to rocky ridges, then down into valleys where the wind howled like something alive and angry. His horse, a gray gelding named Flint, had stamina, but not the kind of speed Rowan needed. Every hour that passed felt like watching Lydia slip further beyond reach. He pushed harder than he should have, knew it, didn't care. By noon, the sky had turned the color of old bruises, heavy clouds building from the west. Storm coming, big one, from the smell of the air and the way the temperature was dropping. He should have stopped, found shelter, waited it out like any sensible person would. Instead, he wrapped his coat tighter and kept riding. The first trading post he reached was a ramshackle collection of buildings clinging to the side of a granite outcrop, the kind of place that existed purely because travelers needed somewhere to rest between longer destinations. Rowan tied Flint outside the general store, his legs unsteady when his boots hit the ground. 8 hours in the saddle without a break. His body was informing him he wasn't 25 anymore. The store smelled like leather and old coffee. A woman behind the counter looked up from a ledger, sizing him up in the way frontier people did, calculating whether he was trouble or business. "Help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for someone. Young woman, dark hair, traveling alone. Would have passed through this morning, maybe earlier, riding a bay mare." The woman's expression shifted to something guarded. "Lot of people pass through." Rowan pulled out his wallet, set 3 bills on the counter. More than generous. The woman's eyes flicked to the money, then back to his face. "Don't want trouble," she said. "Neither do I. I just need to know if you've seen her." "Why?" The question caught him off guard. "She's my wife." "That's supposed to mean something?" Rowan felt heat rise in his chest, frustration, exhaustion, the jagged edges of panic he'd been trying to keep contained. "It means I need to find her. It means I made a mistake. It means, it means you think you got a right to chase her down? The woman crossed her arms. See, here's the thing. Woman comes through here alone, moving fast, looking over her shoulder. I get curious. And when I get curious, I ask questions. What did she tell you? Told me she needed supplies and directions to Mercer's Crossing. Told me she was starting over. Didn't mention a husband. The woman paused. Also didn't have any bruises before you ask. I checked. The implication hit like a slap. I would never, don't matter to me either way. Just matters that she wanted to be left alone. The woman nodded toward the money. You can keep that. I don't take payment for selling people out. Rowan stared at her, something cold settling in his stomach. This is what he looked like to strangers. A man chasing a woman who didn't want to be found. The kind of situation that ended badly more often than not. I'm not trying to drag her back, he said quietly. I'm trying to fix what I broke. There's a difference. Is there? The woman's face softened slightly. Look, mister, I don't know your story, but I've seen enough of these situations to know that good intentions don't mean much if the other person doesn't want to hear them. Maybe the best thing you can do is let her go. I can't. The words came out raw. I know what it looks like. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I can't just... He stopped, surprised by the tightness in his throat. She's the only good thing I had, and I was too much of a coward to see it until she was gone. The woman studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Mercer's Crossing is 2 days north if you push hard. There's a settlement there, couple hundred people. If she's looking to disappear, that's a good place to start. She pushed the money back across the counter. But if you catch up to her and she tells you to leave, you leave. Understand? Yes, ma'am. And for what it's worth, you look like you're about to fall over. There's a room upstairs, $15 a night, food included. Rowan glanced out the window at the darkening sky. The smart move was to rest, let Flint recover, start fresh in the morning. But smart moves were how he'd lost Lydia in the first place. Thank you, but I need to keep moving. The woman shook her head. Stubborn. That probably got you into this mess, didn't it? Yes, ma'am. Probably did. He bought supplies, dried meat, coffee, grain for Flint, and was back on the trail within 20 minutes. The storm broke an hour later. Rain came sideways, driven by wind that felt like it was trying to shove him out of the saddle. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. The trail turned to mud, then to something closer to a river. Flint struggled, hooves slipping on rocks that appeared out of nowhere. Rowan should have stopped, should have found an overhang, waited it out. Every rational part of his brain was screaming at him to get out of the weather, but rationality was what had cost him his marriage. Careful consideration, risk management, making the smart choice instead of the right one. He'd spent 2 years being rational, being controlled, being the man who made good decisions, and he'd lost everything that mattered. So he kept riding through the storm, half blind and soaked to the bone, chasing a woman who had every reason to hate him. The horse stumbled badly around hour 3 of the deluge. Rowan felt it happening, the way Flint's front leg buckled, the sideways lurch that sent them both sliding down an embankment in a chaos of mud and rock and failing limbs. He kicked free of the stirrups just before they went down, hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind out of him, rolled through brush that tore at his face and hands. He came to rest against a boulder, rain hammering down, ribs screaming. For a moment he just lay there trying to remember how to breathe. Flint was on his feet, favoring his right front leg. Not broken, Rowan could tell that much from the way he was putting some weight on it, but strained, maybe sprained, definitely not fit to ride for a while. Easy, Rowan gasped, dragging himself upright. Everything hurt. His left wrist was swelling, his ribs felt like they'd been kicked by something large and angry, and his head was doing an interesting thing where the world tilted slightly to the left. Easy, boy, let me see. He checked Flint's leg as best he could in the rain and fading light. Not broken. Probably. Hard to tell for certain in these conditions, but pushing him further would be cruel and stupid. They'd gone maybe 15 miles from the trading post. Mercer's Crossing was still 2 days out, assuming good weather and no injuries. Rowan looked up at the sky, rain pounding his face, and for the first time since he'd found the letter, he let himself feel the full weight of what he'd done. Not just the 2 years of distance, not just the forgotten anniversary or the locked doors or the conversations he'd avoided. The whole architecture of his life. The fortress he'd built out of control and discipline, and the belief that if he just managed everything perfectly, nothing bad would happen. That he could keep the world at arm's length and call it strength. It hadn't been strength. It had been fear, dressed up in expensive clothes and mistaken for competence. And now he was alone in a storm, injured, with a lame horse and no real plan beyond find her and figure out what to say. He almost laughed. Would have if his ribs didn't hurt so much. There was a cave system about a mile west. He remembered it from hunting trips years ago. Small, barely more than an overhang, but dry. He got Flint moving, leading him carefully through the dark and rain, each step a negotiation with pain. The cave was still there, miraculously. Rowan got Flint settled, built a fire with shaking hands, and collapsed against the stone wall while the storm raged outside. His coat was destroyed, torn in a dozen places. His hat was gone, lost somewhere in the fall. His supplies were mostly intact, at least. Small mercies. He pulled Lydia's letter from his inside pocket. The paper was damp but readable. He'd read it so many times he could probably recite it from memory, but he read it again anyway, letting each word sink in like a stone. I cannot love a man who refuses to see me. She'd been right there, every day for 2 years. Right there, trying, and he treated her like an item on a checklist. Wife, acquired. Housing, provided. Needs, met. Except he'd never asked what she actually needed, never asked what she thought about, what she wanted, what scared her, what made her laugh. Never asked why she chose gray for the wedding, or why she spent hours in the garden, or why she was always awake at 2 a.m. baking bread like she was trying to feed something that never got full. He'd been married to a stranger because he'd been too afraid to know her. The fire crackled. Outside, the storm showed no signs of stopping. Rowan closed his eyes and tried to figure out what the hell he was going to say if he actually caught up to her. Morning came cold and clear, the kind of brutal sunshine that felt mocking after a night like that. Rowan's ribs were worse, definitely cracked, possibly broken. His wrist was swollen to almost twice its normal size. And Flint's leg, while not broken, needed rest. Days of it, probably. He had no horse, no way to cover ground quickly, and Lydia was getting further away every hour he sat here. The smart move, there it was again, that word, was to head back to the trading post. Send word to the estate. Get a fresh horse and medical attention. Regroup and try again with better planning. Rowan started walking north instead. His logic, if he could even call it that, was simple. He'd wasted 2 years being careful, being smart, making the right tactical decisions while missing everything that actually mattered. If he was going to fail, and the odds of success were looking increasingly grim, he was going to fail trying, not calculating. He left Flint in the cave with food and water, marked the location on his map, and set out on foot. Each step was a sharp reminder that he was 43 and not built for this kind of abuse anymore. His ribs protested every breath. His wrist throbbed in time with his heartbeat. He walked anyway. The trail climbed through pine forest, the ground still muddy from the storm. Twice he had to stop and lean against trees, waiting for the dizziness to pass. Once he was pretty sure he blacked out for a second, came back to himself sitting on a fallen log with no memory of deciding to sit down. This was stupid, monumentally stupid, the kind of decision that got people killed in country like this. But turning back felt like giving up on the only thing he'd ever actually wanted once he realized he wanted it. So he kept walking. He made maybe 8 miles before his body staged a full revolt. The world tilted sideways, his legs stopped cooperating, and he found himself on his knees in the mud, breathing hard, ribs screaming, vision going gray at the edges. This was it. The moment where stubbornness ran headfirst into reality and lost. He was going to die out here, alone, because he'd been too stupid to rest when he should have. Because he'd spent 43 years confusing control with strength, and by the time he figured out the difference, it was too late. The irony was almost funny. You look like shit. Rowan's head snapped up. Bad idea. Made the world spin worse. And focused on the man standing on the trail ahead. Tall, maybe 60, with a face that had been weathered into something that looked carved from the landscape itself. "Thanks," Rowan managed. "Helpful." The man approached, boots squelching in the mud. "You're bleeding, and based on the way you're holding those ribs, you're injured worse than you should be walking around with." He crouched down, eyes sharp. "What the hell are you doing out here alone?" "Looking for someone. In this condition? Didn't have a choice." The man snorted. "Everyone's got choices. You just made a dumb one." He stood, offered a hand. "I've got a camp about 2 miles west. You're coming with me before you kill yourself through sheer stupidity. I need to keep going. Son, you take 5 more steps and you're going to pass out. Then you're going to die of exposure or infection or just plain idiocy. So you've got 2 choices. Come with me and live, or keep walking and die." "What's it going to be?" Rowan wanted to argue, wanted to insist he was fine, that he could keep moving, that stopping meant losing Lydia forever. But the world was tilting again, and his body had apparently decided to stop taking orders from his brain. "Fine," he said, "but just until I can move again." "Sure," the man said, not even trying to hide his skepticism. "Just until then." The man's name was Garrett, and his camp turned out to be a surprisingly solid cabin tucked into a valley that didn't show on any map Rowan had seen. Garrett was a trapper, apparently, one of the old-school types who spent months in the wilderness, and only came to town when supplies ran low. "Sit," Garrett ordered, pointing to a chair by the fire. "Don't move." Rowan sat. Didn't have much choice. His legs had stopped working properly somewhere during the 2-mile walk. Garrett worked with the efficiency of someone who'd patched up injuries before. He wrapped Rowan's ribs, splinted his wrist, cleaned the cuts on his face and hands with something that burned like liquid fire. "Cracked ribs, maybe broken," Garrett said. "Wrist is sprained, not broken. You're lucky. Stupid, but lucky." He handed Rowan a cup of something that smelled medicinal. "Drink. It'll help with the pain." Rowan drank. It tasted like pine needles and regret. "How long?" "How long what?" "Until I can travel." Garrett laughed. "You're not serious." "I need to find her." "The someone you're looking for. I'm guessing this is a woman who left you?" Rowan's silence was answer enough. "Right." Garrett sat down across from him. "So let me get this straight. Your wife, or whatever she is, left. You chased after her in a storm. You wrecked yourself and your horse. And now you're asking how soon you can get back out there and finish the job of killing yourself. It's not like that." "What's it like then?" Rowan stared into the fire, trying to find words that didn't sound insane. "I spent 2 years taking her for granted, treating our marriage like a business arrangement. She tried. She really tried. And I just didn't see it. Didn't see her. And now she's gone. And if I don't at least try to make it right, then what the hell was any of it for?" "Maybe it wasn't for anything," Garrett said bluntly. "Maybe you screwed up and she left. And that's the end of the story. Maybe the best thing you can do is accept it and move on." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because," Rowan stopped, tried to organize thoughts that felt scattered and desperate. "Because I've spent my whole life building walls, keeping people at a distance, telling myself it was strength when really I was just scared. And she was the one person who looked at those walls and didn't run. She stayed. She tried. And I repaid that by nothing. By absence. By treating her like furniture." He looked at Garrett, surprised by the heat behind his eyes. "I can't just let that be the end. I can't let her think that was all she was worth to me. Even if she never takes me back. Especially if she never takes me back. I need her to know that I see her now. That I'm sorry. That she mattered." Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moved to a cabinet, pulled out a bottle and 2 glasses. Poured. "My wife left me 20 years ago," he said, handing Rowan a glass. "I was working oil rigs, gone 10 months out of the year. Told myself I was doing it for her, for the kids. Building a future." He laughed bitterly. "She told me she didn't need a future with a ghost. I didn't listen. Figured she'd understand eventually. What happened? She left. Took the kids. I didn't go after her because I was proud and stupid and convinced I'd been right. Garrett drank. 20 years later, I'm alone in the woods talking to idiots who are about to make the same mistakes I did. So here's my advice. Worth exactly what you're paying for it. If you're going to do this, do it right. Don't just chase her down and expect an apology to fix 2 years of damage. That's still trying to manage the situation, still trying to control the outcome. Then what should I do? Figure out who you want to be. Not who you were, not who you think she wants, who you actually want to be. Because if you catch up to her and you're still the same man who let her walk away, you'll just hurt her worse. Rowan sat with that, drank the whiskey, let it burn. How long? He asked again. Garrett sighed. 3 days minimum before those ribs are stable enough to travel. Week before I'd recommend it, and that's assuming you rest properly, which I'm guessing you won't. 3 days. Don't make me regret helping you. Rowan spent those 3 days in a kind of enforced stillness that felt like torture. His body needed rest. He knew that intellectually. But every hour that passed was another hour Lydia was moving away. Another hour closer to her disappearing completely. Garrett, to his credit, didn't let him wallow. Made him help with small tasks that didn't require much movement, cleaning traps, sorting furs, organizing supplies. Kept him occupied. They didn't talk much. Garrett wasn't the chatty type. But on the second night, sitting by the fire, he asked, "What's her name?" "Lydia." "You love her?" The question should have been simple, yes or no. But Rowan found himself stuck on it, turning it over like a stone he'd never properly examined. "I don't know," he finally said. "I don't know if what I feel is love or just fear of losing something I didn't appreciate." "How do you tell the difference?" "Love's not something you feel," Garrett said. "It's something you do. It's the choice you make every day to show up, to see the other person, to put them first even when it's inconvenient or scary or means admitting you were wrong." He poked the fire. "Feelings come and go. Love is the decision to stay anyway." "I didn't stay." "No, you built a fortress and called it a marriage." Garrett looked at him. "Question is, are you chasing her because you love her or because you don't like losing?" The words hit hard. Rowan wanted to immediately deny it, to insist his motives were pure. But honesty, the brutal kind, required admitting he didn't fully know. "Maybe both," he said quietly. "Maybe I'm still trying to control the situation by fixing it. Maybe I just can't stand the idea that I failed at something." "At least you're honest about it." "Doesn't make it better." "No," Garrett agreed, "but it's a start." On the morning of the fourth day, Rowan was ready to move. His ribs still hurt, but the sharp pain had dulled to something more manageable. His wrist was stable in the splint. He could walk without feeling like he was going to pass out. Garrett gave him supplies and directions to Mercer's Crossing. "There's a doctor there named Chen. Get yourself properly checked out when you arrive, and for the love of—" He stopped, shook his head. "Just try not to die between here and there." "Thank you," Rowan said, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet. You might still screw this up." Garrett paused. "But if you do find her, if she gives you a chance to explain, don't waste it trying to convince her you've changed. Show her. Words are cheap. Actions are what matter." Rowan nodded, started down the trail, made it maybe 50 feet before Garrett called after him. "Hey." He turned. "She left you a letter instead of just disappearing. That means part of her still hoped you'd understand. Don't prove her wrong." Mercer's Crossing materialized out of the wilderness like something from a different era. Wood buildings clustered around a central square. Smoke rising from chimneys, the sounds of hammers and voices carrying on the cold air. Bigger than Rowan expected. More permanent. He found the doctor's office first, let Chen, a woman in her 50s with steady hands and skeptical eyes, examine his injuries. "You should be resting," she said, re-wrapping his ribs, "not walking around." "I will, soon." "That what you tell yourself?" She didn't look up from her work. "Seen a lot of men like you come through here, always pushing, always one more thing to do before they can rest. Usually they end up dead or broken." cheerful, honest. She finished with the bandage. Whatever you're chasing, make sure it's worth dying for, because the way you're going, that's where this ends. Rowan paid her, promised to be careful, a lie they both recognized, and headed for the settlement's only inn. The proprietor was a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his jaw and eyes that missed nothing. Room? Information first, looking for someone who might have passed through recently. The man's expression went carefully neutral. A lot of people pass through. Rowan was getting tired of this dance. Young woman, dark hair, traveling alone. She would have been here in the last few days. Maybe. It's important. To you, probably. To her? The man shrugged. Different story. Rowan took a breath, fighting down frustration. I'm her husband. I'm trying to make things right. Husband. The man's tone made it clear what he thought of that. Funny thing, she didn't mention a husband when she rented a room, just said she was starting over, said it real firm like she meant it. Rowan's heart kicked. She's here? Now? Was. Left this morning, said she was heading west looking for work, didn't say where specifically. The man leaned against the counter. Seemed like she didn't want to be found. Did she? Rowan stopped, tried to figure out what question to even ask. Did she seem okay? Seemed tired, seemed determined, seemed like someone who'd made a hard choice and was sticking to it. The man's face softened slightly. Look, I don't know your story, but I'll tell you what I told her when she asked if I'd seen anyone following her. I'm not in the business of tracking people down. She wanted to be left alone. I respect that. I'm not trying to drag her back, Rowan said, hearing the desperation in his own voice. I just need to talk to her, to explain what? That you're sorry? That you'll change? The man shook his head. Women don't leave because they need explanations. They leave because they've heard enough explanations. They leave because words stopped mattering a long time ago. The truth of it settled like lead in Rowan's stomach. Which way did she go? He asked quietly. The man studied him for a long moment, then sighed. West Road. Mentioned something about a ranch that was hiring. Porter's Spread, about 15 miles out. But mister, if you catch up to her and she tells you to leave, you leave. Clear? Clear. Rowan rented a horse, paid double the going rate because he looked desperate and everyone in frontier towns knew how to spot desperation, and was on the West Road before the sun hit its peak. 15 miles. He could cover that before dark if he pushed. His ribs disagreed. His wrist disagreed. Every part of his body that had been through the storm and the fall and 4 days of insufficient rest disagreed. He pushed anyway. The Porter Ranch appeared at sunset, sprawling across a valley with the kind of setup that spoke to serious money and serious operation. Hundreds of cattle, outbuildings in good repair. A main house that looked like it had been built to last generations. Rowan dismounted slowly, every movement deliberate. A ranch hand approached, friendly but cautious. Help you? I'm looking for someone. Young woman who might have come by looking for work. Dark hair, traveling alone. The ranch hand's face closed off. Boss doesn't like strangers asking questions. I'm not trying to cause trouble. She's your wife, yeah. She mentioned you might show up. The man crossed his arms. Said if you did, we should tell you she doesn't want to see you. The words hit like a physical blow. Rowan had expected difficulty, expected resistance, but hearing that Lydia had actually anticipated him following, had left instructions to turn him away, that was different. That was her drawing a line and daring him to cross it. Can you at least tell her I'm here? Rowan asked. Let her decide? She already decided. Chut. Please. The word came out raw. Just tell her I rode through a storm and fell down a mountain and walked for 4 days with broken ribs because I needed to say I'm sorry. Tell her I'm not asking her to come back. I'm not asking her to forgive me. I just need 5 minutes to say what I should have said 2 years ago. The ranch hand hesitated. Wait here. He disappeared into the main house. Rowan stood in the yard, trying to ignore the way his legs were shaking, the way his ribs were screaming, the way every part of him wanted to either collapse or run. The door opened. Lydia stepped out onto the porch. She looked different, stronger somehow. Her hair was pulled back practical. She wore work clothes that had already accumulated dust. And her face was calm, set. The face of someone who'd made a decision and wasn't going to be moved. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice broke something in him. Hearing it again after days of uncertainty, days of fear that he'd never hear it again, it was almost too much. "I know," he managed. "I know I shouldn't. I know you told me not to follow, but I couldn't." He stopped, started over. "I read your letter. Every word. You were right about all of it. That's not why I'm here, Rowan. I didn't leave so you'd finally see me. I left because I couldn't keep disappearing." "I know." "Do you?" She came down the steps, and he could see it now, the anger underneath the calm, the hurt she'd been carrying for 2 years. "Because from where I'm standing, this looks like exactly what I was afraid of. You treating this like a problem to solve, chasing me down because you don't like losing, showing up here with—" She gestured at him, taking in the bandages and bruises, with whatever dramatic gesture this is supposed to be. "It's not a gesture. I fell. I'm an idiot who rode through a storm and wrecked myself because I was trying to catch up to you before you disappeared completely. Why?" The question was so simple, so impossible. "Because I can't lose you without at least trying to—" "To what?" She cut him off. "To fix it? To make it right? Rowan, you can't fix 2 years of nothing with one grand gesture. That's not how this works." "I know." He took a breath, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "I know I can't fix it. I know I probably don't even deserve the chance to try. But I needed you to know that I see you now. I see what I did, what I didn't do. And I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry." Lydia's eyes were bright, angry tears, or maybe just tears. "You hurt me. Every day for 2 years you hurt me. And I stayed because I kept thinking maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe tomorrow you'd actually talk to me like I was a person instead of—" "I know." "You don't." The anger finally broke through. "You don't know. You weren't the one fading away in that house. You weren't the one trying everything you could think of to just matter to someone who looked through you like you were glass." "You're right." He wanted to step closer, didn't. "You're absolutely right. I don't know what that was like. But I know what it's like now. Being on the other side of that distance, watching you walk away and understanding too late what I lost." She wiped her eyes roughly. "I can't come back, Rowan. Back. Even if part of me wanted to, I can't. Because nothing's changed. You're still the same man who locked every door and called it strength." "No." He shook his head. "I'm not. Or I'm trying not to be. I don't know if I can change. Don't know if I know how, but I want to try. Not to get you back. Not to fix this. Just because you deserve better than what I gave you, and I need to become someone who knows that." Lydia stared at him for a long moment, then turned away, arms wrapped around herself. "I don't know what you want me to say." "Nothing. I don't want you to say anything. I just needed you to know that I heard you, that I'm listening now, even if it's too late." The silence stretched between them, filled with everything that had gone unsaid for 2 years and everything that couldn't be unsaid now. Finally, Lydia turned back. "There's a boarding house in town. Mrs. Fletcher runs it. She'll have a room." "Lydia, I need time," she said firmly. "I need space to figure out what I want without you standing there looking like that." She gestured at him again, something almost like concern crossing her face. "And you need to see a doctor and rest before you kill yourself. I can't leave things like this." "You can. You will." She met his eyes. "Because if you actually mean what you're saying, if you actually want to change, then you'll respect what I'm asking for. You'll give me space instead of pushing. You'll prove you're different by acting different." The words echoed what Garrett had said, what the doctor had implied, what everyone had been trying to tell him. Love wasn't something you felt. It was something you did. And right now the loving thing was to let her go. "Okay," he said. "Okay. I'll go to the boarding house. I'll give you space. But Lydia, can I write to you? Not to convince you of anything, just to talk, the way we should have been talking all along." She hesitated, then slowly nodded. You can write. I can't promise I'll respond. That's fair. She turned to go back inside, stopped at the door. Rowan? Yeah? That thing you said in your letter about not coming after me unless you actually wanted to try, did you mean it? He thought about Garrett's question, about whether this was love or just fear of losing, about whether he'd changed or just gotten better at pretending. I want to, he said honestly. I don't know if I know how, don't know if I'm capable of being what you needed, but I want to try. That's all I've got. Lydia nodded slowly. That's more than you gave me before. Then she went inside, and Rowan was alone in the yard with a borrowed horse and broken ribs and the faint, terrible hope that maybe this wasn't the end, just a different kind of beginning. Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house smelled like old wood and something that might have been lavender mixed with decades of cooking. The room she showed Rowan was small, clean, and unremarkable. A bed, a desk, a window that looked out onto the main street of a town he'd never planned to see. 2 weeks paid up front, Mrs. Fletcher said, her tone making it clear this wasn't negotiable. No drinking in the rooms, breakfast is at 7, dinner at 6. You miss it, you miss it. Yes, ma'am. She looked him over with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen every kind of trouble walk through her door. You're hurt worse than you're letting on. I'll manage. Men always say that right before they collapse. She shook her head. Dr. Chen's clinic is 2 blocks north. I'd suggest you visit her again tomorrow. Actually visit, not just promise you will, and then don't. I will. Sure you will. She paused at the door. The young woman you're here for, she doesn't want trouble. This is a small community. People talk. You make problems for her, you'll have problems with everyone, clear? I'm not here to cause trouble. That's what they all say. But her expression softened slightly. Get some rest. You look like death walked over. She left him alone in the room that was now, apparently, his home for the immediate future. Rowan sat on the bed carefully, his ribs protesting even that small movement. Everything hurt. His body was a catalog of damage. Cracked ribs, sprained wrist, bruises layered on bruises, cuts that were trying to heal but kept reopening. He should sleep, should rest like everyone kept telling him to. Instead, he pulled out paper from the desk drawer and started writing. The words came hard at first. He'd spent 43 years avoiding this kind of vulnerability, and his brain didn't know how to navigate it without all the usual defenses. But he forced himself through it, crossing out false starts, trying to find truth instead of performance. Lydia, I don't know if you'll read this, don't know if you should, but you said I could write, so I'm writing. I've been sitting here trying to figure out where to start. How to explain 2 years of failure in a way that makes sense. But there's no way to make it make sense, is there? I was scared. That's the simple truth. I was scared that if I let you in, if I actually gave you the parts of myself I've spent decades learning to hide, you'd see what I've always suspected, that underneath all the control and discipline, there's nothing worth keeping. My father died when I was 19, bled out from a hunting accident while I tried to stop it with my bare hands. Didn't work. Nothing I did worked. And I think part of me decided right then that if I could just control everything, every variable, every risk, every possible outcome, I'd never feel that helpless again. It worked, mostly. Built an empire. Made a name. Became the man people respected and feared and relied on. But I turned myself into a fortress in the process. And fortresses keep people out. That's their whole purpose. You walked into that fortress and tried to make it a home. And instead of helping you, instead of opening the gates, I just let you wander the halls alone. Told myself you were fine, that you had everything you needed, that this was enough. I don't know how to be different yet. Don't know if I even can be. But I'm trying to learn. That's what I wanted you to know. Not that I've changed, I haven't earned that claim, but that I'm trying. Take whatever time you need. I'll be here. Rowan. He read it over 3 times, hating how inadequate it felt. How could words capture 2 years of absence? How could an apology mean anything when the damage was already done? But inadequate was better than silent. So he sealed it, addressed it to the Porter Ranch, and left it with Mrs. Fletcher to be delivered in the morning. Then he collapsed into bed and slept for 14 hours straight. The next week fell into a strange routine. Rowan woke early. Habit didn't break just because geography changed. He'd walk to the clinic where Dr. Chen would check his ribs, change his bandages, and tell him he was healing slower than he should be because he wasn't resting properly. "You need to stop pushing," she said on the fourth visit. "Your body is trying to repair itself. Give it time." "I am giving it time." "You're walking 5 miles a day. I can tell from the way you're moving." She fixed him with a look that probably worked on her children. "What are you doing?" "Just walking, thinking." "Walk less, think more while sitting down." But the walking helped. The town was small enough to see in an afternoon, but complex enough to actually exist as a place rather than just a waypoint. There was a school, a church, a mercantile, a blacksmith, a stable. People who'd lived here for generations alongside newcomers looking for fresh starts. Rowan found himself in the mercantile one afternoon, not buying anything in particular, just existing in a space that wasn't his room or the clinic. The owner, a man named Davis, struck up a conversation with the ease of someone who made his living talking to strangers. "You're the one staying at Fletcher's place," Davis said. "That's right." "Following your wife who doesn't want to be followed." News traveled fast in small towns. "Something like that." Davis nodded. "My wife left me once, 5 years into our marriage. Said I worked too much, didn't listen, took her for granted. All the usual crimes." "What did you do?" "Spent 2 months trying to win her back with flowers and promises and all the romantic nonsense I'd never bothered with before." Davis laughed. "Didn't work." "Know what did work? I stopped trying to convince her I'd changed and just changed. Got a partner to help run the store. Started coming home for dinner. Actually listened when she talked instead of just waiting for my turn to speak." "How long did it take? Before she came back? 6 months? Before she actually trusted I meant it? Couple years." Davis met his eyes. "Point is, you can't shortcut this, can't performance art your way into redemption. You have to actually do the work of becoming someone different." "I don't know if I know how." "Nobody does. That's the whole point. You figure it out by doing it." Rowan bought coffee he didn't need and left thinking about the difference between performing change and actually changing, about whether he was capable of the latter or just getting better at the former. 3 days after his first letter, he wrote another, and then another 3 days after that. Not pushing for responses, not asking her to forgive him or come back, just writing the conversations they'd never had. Telling her things about himself he'd never told anyone, the nightmares he still had about his father, the way he'd built the estate as a monument to control because he couldn't control the one thing that mattered, the mornings he'd stood outside her door, wanting to knock and losing his nerve. The letters disappeared into the void. No responses came back. He kept writing anyway. 2 weeks in, Mrs. Fletcher knocked on his door at breakfast time. "You've got a visitor." Rowan's heart jumped. "Lydia?" "No, someone from your estate. Says his name is Marcus." Rowan found Marcus in the boarding house parlor, hat in hands, looking uncomfortable in the domestic setting. Relief and guilt hit simultaneously. Relief at seeing a familiar face, guilt at how much he'd abandoned back home. "Boss, Marcus said. "How bad is it?" Rowan asked, skipping pleasantries. "Not bad. Running smooth. Everyone knows their jobs." Marcus paused. "But there are decisions piling up that need your input. Contracts coming due. Equipment needs replacing. The usual. You can handle it. Some of it, not all of it." Marcus shifted his weight. "How long are you planning to stay here?" "As long as it takes." "And if it takes forever?" The question hung between them. Rowan had built his entire adult life around the estate. It was his identity, his purpose, the thing that defined him. Walking away from it, even temporarily, should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing he'd done in years. "Then it takes forever," Rowan said. "You're authorized to make whatever decisions need making. Pay yourself double for the extra work. Hire more people if you need them. I trust your judgment." Marcus stared at him. "You're serious?" "Yeah." "Sarah's going to have questions. So is everyone else." "Tell them I'm taking care of something I should have taken care of 2 years ago." Rowan met his foreman's eyes. "Tell them I finally figured out what actually matters." Marcus nodded slowly. "All right, But boss, are you okay? You look like you've been through hell. I have, still am, probably. Rowan managed something close to a smile. But I'm working on it. Marcus left with a list of authorizations and the kind of concerned look that came from 12 years of working alongside someone. Rowan watched him ride away and felt the weight of the estate, the empire he'd built, settle differently. Still there, still important. But not the only thing, not anymore. That night he wrote to Lydia about Marcus's visit, about the strange freedom of letting go, about how terrifying it was to realize the thing he'd built his life around couldn't fill the hole she'd left. He still didn't expect a response. So when Mrs. Fletcher handed him a letter 3 days later with Lydia's handwriting on the envelope, he almost couldn't make himself open it. He took it to his room, sat on the bed, stared at it for 5 minutes before his hand stopped shaking enough to break the seal. Rowan, I've read your letters. All of them. I wasn't going to respond because I didn't want to give you false hope or make you think this changes anything, but I also don't want to be cruel. So here's what I need you to understand. I'm not angry anymore, or I am, but it's different now. It's the kind of anger that comes from caring about someone who hurt you, not from hating them. And I think that's actually harder. Hatred is clean. This is messy. I believe you're trying. I believe you mean what you're writing, but trying isn't the same as succeeding, and meaning well isn't the same as doing better. I've spent 2 years hoping you'd change, and I can't spend more time waiting to see if you actually will. I need to build a life here, a real one that doesn't revolve around waiting for you to become someone different. That's not fair to either of us. I don't know what that means for us. I don't know if there even is an us anymore. But I need you to understand that I'm not here waiting. I'm here living. And if you're going to stay in this town, you need to be living too, not just existing in limbo hoping I'll take you back. There's a community meeting Thursday night at the town hall. They're organizing a barn raising for a family that lost theirs in a fire. If you want to help, show up. Not because I'll be there, not to prove anything to me, but because it's the right thing to do, and because maybe you need to learn how to be part of something instead of just running it. Lydia Rowan read the letter 4 times, parsing every word for hidden meaning. She wasn't saying no, but she wasn't saying yes either. She was setting a boundary and a challenge, and he didn't know which scared him more. Thursday night came cold and clear. The town hall was packed. Seemed like the whole community had turned out. Rowan stood in the back, suddenly aware of how much he stood out. Everyone here knew each other, had histories and connections that went back years. He was the stranger, the outsider, the man chasing a woman who'd made it clear she didn't want to be chased. Lydia was near the front, talking to a woman with 3 kids clinging to her skirts. She looked different here, comfortable, like she belonged in a way she'd never belonged at the estate. The meeting started with a man named Porter, same Porter who owned the ranch where Lydia was working, explaining the situation. The Hendricks family had lost everything in a fire 2 weeks back. House, barn, most of their possessions. They needed help rebuilding before winter set in hard. We'll start the barn Saturday at dawn, what Porter said. Need bodies, tools, materials, whatever you can spare. People started volunteering immediately. Labor, lumber, food for the workers. The kind of communal effort that cities didn't do anymore, but frontier towns still understood as survival. Rowan raised his hand. I can help with materials and labor. The room went quiet. Everyone turned to look at him. Porter's face was carefully neutral. Appreciate the offer. You have construction experience? Some. Enough to follow directions. What about materials? I can wire my estate. Have them send whatever's needed. Lumber, nails, hardware. I'll cover it. A murmur went through the crowd. That was serious money. The kind of contribution that changed the whole scope of what was possible. That's generous, Porter said slowly, but we don't need charity. We take care of our own. It's not charity, it's... Rowan stopped, tried to find words that didn't sound like he was trying to buy his way into acceptance. I'm staying in this town for the foreseeable future. These are my neighbors now, even if they don't know me yet. Helping them is just what you do. Porter studied him, then nodded. All right, we'll take you up on it. Show up Saturday, 6 a.m. Don't be late. After the meeting broke up, Rowan found himself surrounded by people introducing themselves, shaking his hand, thanking him for the offer. The overwhelming friendliness of small-town life, where one generous gesture could shift how you were seen. He didn't see Lydia leave, just looked up at some point and realized she was gone. Saturday morning came with frost on the ground, and his ribs reminding him this was a terrible idea. Dr. Chen had been clear. Heavy labor was off the table for at least another week. But Rowan showed up at 6 anyway, wearing work clothes that felt strange after weeks of recovery. The Hendricks property was a organized chaos of activity. 40, maybe 50 people, all working with the practiced efficiency of a community that had done this before. Foundations were already laid. They must have been working on prep all week. Porter found him immediately. "You look like you're going to fall over." "I'm fine." "You're not. I can see you favoring those ribs." Porter pointed to a group sorting materials. "You're on organization duty. Inventory what we've got. Make sure supplies are where they need to be. No heavy lifting. Clear?" It should have felt like a demotion. Instead, it felt like Porter actually seeing him, seeing the injury, seeing the limitation, and finding a way to let him contribute anyway. "Clear," Rowan said. He spent the morning tracking lumber, counting nails, making sure the right materials got to the right people at the right time. Logistics he understood, organization he could handle. And slowly, as the sun climbed higher and the barn frame started taking shape, he realized something. He was useful here without being in charge. Nobody was asking him to make final decisions. Nobody was deferring to his authority. He was just another body helping with a task that mattered, and there was a freedom in that he hadn't expected. Lunch was a communal affair, tables set up with food people had brought, everyone eating together, kids running around screaming. Rowan found a spot at the edge, not quite part of things, but not completely separate either. "You're doing good work," the voice came from beside him. He turned to find Lydia holding 2 cups of coffee, offering him one. His heart did something complicated. "Thanks." She sat down, not close, but not distant either. Careful distance. "Porter says the materials you sent are enough to finish the barn and probably build a new house frame." Seemed like the right thing. "It is." She sipped her coffee. "Everyone's talking about it. About you. They're impressed." "Trying to buy my way into acceptance? Are you?" She looked at him directly for the first time since he'd arrived in town. "No. Maybe. I don't know." He set down the coffee. "I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not the person in charge. When I'm just, someone helping. It's harder than I thought. Being part of something is always harder than running it. You have to trust other people, have to accept that you're not the center." "Yeah, I'm getting that." They sat in silence for a moment. Not comfortable exactly, but not hostile either. Just 2 people existing in the same space without all the weight of history crushing everything. "Your letters," Lydia said finally. "They're different than I expected." "Different how?" "Honest. Raw. The kind of honest that's uncomfortable to read because it doesn't hide anything." She turned the coffee cup in her hands. "I don't know what to do with them." "You don't have to do anything. I'm not trying to manipulate you, just trying to talk to you the way I should have all along. I know, that's what makes them hard." She stood. "I should get back. They need help with the roof framing." "Lydia," she paused, "thank you for talking to me. Even just this." "Don't read too much into it, Rowan. We're just 2 people having coffee." But the way she said it, gentle, not cutting, felt like maybe there was room for something. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. She walked away and Rowan let her go without trying to extend the conversation. Small victories. The barn raising took 3 days. 3 days of communal labor, shared meals, the kind of exhausting work that broke your body but somehow filled something else. Rowan worked within his limitations, contributed where he could, and slowly started to recognize faces, learn names, become part of the fabric instead of a stranger on the edges. On the 3rd evening, as the last of the roof was being finished, Thomas Hendricks, the man whose barn they'd rebuilt, found Rowan in the crowd. "I wanted to thank you," Thomas said. His face was weathered, his hands scarred from years of hard work. "For the materials." For the help. You didn't know us, didn't owe us anything. Everyone needs help sometimes. That's true. But not everyone shows up when it's not their problem. Thomas stuck out his hand. You're a good man. Don't let anyone tell you different. Rowan shook his hand, throat tight. He wasn't a good man. He'd been a terrible husband, an absent partner, a person who'd chosen control over connection for so long he'd almost forgotten how to do anything else. But maybe that wasn't permanent. Maybe good and bad weren't fixed states, but ongoing choices. Thank you, Rowan managed. That night he wrote to Lydia about the barn raising, about how strange it felt to be useful without being in charge, about Thomas's words and how they'd hit differently than any business success ever had. He was starting to understand what she'd meant about living instead of waiting, about building a life that mattered for its own sake, not as a means to an end. 2 days later, another letter came from her. Rowan, I've been thinking about what it means to forgive someone. Not the performative kind where you say the words and pretend everything's fine. The real kind that requires actually letting go of the hurt. I don't know if I can do that yet. The hurt is still there. Some days it's smaller, like background noise. Other days it's loud enough to drown out everything else. But I've also been thinking about who I want to be. And I don't want to be someone who holds on to anger so tightly that it defines me. I don't want the worst thing that happened to me to become my whole story. I'm working at the Porter Ranch. Did I tell you that? I'm learning to manage the books, helping with operations. It's good work. Margaret Porter is teaching me things about ranching I never knew. Her husband John is gruff but fair. They have a partnership that actually works. They fight sometimes, but they also laugh and make decisions together and show up for each other. Watching them makes me realize what I wanted with you, what I thought we might have. And it hurts to see it work for other people while ours fell apart. But it also gives me hope that maybe it's possible. Maybe not for us, I still don't know about us, but possible in general. I need more time. I know that's not fair to you. I know you're in limbo, waiting to see if I'll ever be ready to try again. But I can't rush this. I can't force forgiveness before it's real just to give you an answer. Can you live with that? Can you actually stay here, build a life here, without knowing if we'll ever be anything more than two people who used to be married? Think about it. Really think about it. Because if you can't, then maybe it's better if you go back to the estate and we both move on. Lydia. The letter felt like a test, like she was pushing to see if he'd crack, if he'd revert to type and try to control the situation or demand an answer on his timeline. Rowan sat with it for 3 days before responding. Lydia, yes, I can live with that. I'm not going anywhere. Not because I'm waiting for you to take me back, but because I'm learning to be someone who stays. Someone who shows up even when it's uncomfortable. Someone who doesn't run when things aren't immediately fixed. You asked if I can build a life here without knowing if we'll ever be more than two people who used to be married. The answer is yes. Because I'm starting to understand that the life I build needs to matter for its own sake, not just as a way to win you back. I'm working with the blacksmith. His apprentice broke his arm, and he needed help. I'm terrible at it, but I'm learning. I joined the community council meetings. I'm reading books from the library about things I never made time for before. I'm building a life, not a perfect one, not even a good one yet, but one that's mine in a way the estate never was. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. Rowan. He meant it. That was the terrifying part. Somewhere in the weeks of recovery and letter writing and barn raising and being part of something without controlling it, he'd stopped performing change and started actually living it. 3 weeks later, Lydia showed up at the boarding house. Mrs. Fletcher found him in the parlor, where he'd been reading, actually reading, not just scanning for information, and said simply, "You've got a visitor." Lydia stood in the doorway, wrapped in a coat against the autumn cold, her face unreadable. "Hi," she said. "Hi." Rowan set down the book, suddenly aware of how domestic the scene was. Him sitting in a borrowed parlor reading poetry of all things, looking nothing like the man who'd run an empire with iron discipline. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Not here. Somewhere. Neutral." "Sure. Where?" "There's a trail behind the church. Leads to a ridge with a view of the valley." I go there sometimes when I need to think." They walked in silence, the kind that felt heavy with all the words neither of them knew how to say. The trail was steep, and Rowan's ribs complained, but he pushed through it without comment. The ridge overlooked the valley where the town sat, a sprawl of buildings and fields and forests that looked almost peaceful in the afternoon light. Lydia sat on a flat rock, and after a moment, Rowan joined her. "I've been watching you," she said finally, "these past weeks, watching how you move through town, how you interact with people, how you show up. And you're different, or trying to be. I can see it." She picked at a thread on her coat. "But I'm scared, Rowan. I'm scared that this is temporary, that once the novelty wears off, or once you get what you want, you'll go back to being who you were. And I can't go through that again." "I can't promise I won't mess up," Rowan said carefully. "Can't promise I won't fall back into old patterns or hurt you again. All I can promise is that I'm trying, every day, to be better than I was. That's not enough." The words hit hard. What would be enough? "I don't know. That's the problem. I don't know what would make me trust you again. Don't know what proof would be sufficient. And without knowing that, I don't know how to move forward. So we're stuck. Maybe." She finally looked at him. "Or maybe we're just not ready yet. Maybe some things take longer than a few weeks of letters and barn raising." "I can wait." "That's what you keep saying. But Rowan, what are you waiting for? For me to suddenly wake up and decide I trust you? For enough time to pass that the hurt doesn't matter anymore? For me to give you permission to stop trying?" He didn't have a good answer, because she was right. He'd been thinking of this as waiting, as a period to endure before things could go back to something resembling normal, not as building an entirely new foundation. "I don't know," he admitted. "I keep thinking there's a finish line, a point where I've done enough and we can start over. But that's still trying to control the outcome, isn't it? Still trying to manage this like a project with milestones." "Yeah, it is." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I need you to let go of the idea that you can earn your way back. That if you just do enough good things or wait long enough or prove yourself sufficiently, I'll forgive you and we'll be fine. That's not how this works." "Then how does it work?" "I don't know. I've never done this before either." She stood, agitation clear in every movement. "All I know is that I can't be responsible for your growth. Can't be the goal you're working toward. You have to do this for yourself, and I have to figure out my own life. And maybe, somewhere down the line, we'll find a way to exist in the same space without all this weight." "Lydia." "I'm not done." She cut him off. "I need to say this, all of it, because I've spent 2 years not saying things, and I'm done with that." "Okay, I'm listening." She took a breath. "You broke something in me, not on purpose. I don't think you're cruel, but you broke it anyway. You made me feel invisible in my own life. Made me question whether I was asking for too much by wanting basic human connection from my husband. And now you're here, trying, and part of me wants to believe it's real. But another part, the part that remembers what it felt like to fade away in that house, that part is terrified." "I know, I understand." "No, you don't." Her voice cracked. "You don't understand what it's like to love someone who won't let you in. To spend every day trying to find a crack in the wall and getting nothing. To slowly realize that you're not the problem. They are, but still wondering if maybe you're not enough, not interesting enough, not worth the effort of actually showing up for." Tears were streaming down her face now, and Rowan wanted desperately to comfort her, to pull her close, and promise it would be okay. But he stayed where he was, giving her space to finally say everything she'd held back. "And the worst part," she continued, "is that I still care about you, even after everything. Even after leaving and building a new life and convincing myself I was done, I still care. And that makes me so angry. At you for breaking us. At myself for not being able to let go. Lydia, I'm sorry. I don't want your apology." The words came out sharp. I want to not care anymore. I want to be able to look at you and feel nothing, but I can't. And I hate that I can't." Silence fell between them, broken only by her ragged breathing and the wind moving through the trees below. "I don't know what to do with that," Rowan said finally. "Don't know how to make it better or whether I should even try." All I know is that hurting you was the worst thing I've ever done. And if I could take it back, if I could go back to that first night and actually knock on your door and have a real conversation, I would do it in a heartbeat. But you can't. And we can't build a future on hypotheticals. She wiped her eyes roughly. I need space, real space, not just physical distance, but I need you to stop waiting. Stop watching me like you're trying to gauge whether I'm ready to forgive you. Just live your life, build your life, and let me do the same. And then what? I don't know, maybe nothing. Maybe we just become two people who live in the same town and nod when we pass each other on the street. Maybe that's all we get. The thought of that, of being permanently relegated to polite strangers, felt like dying, but Rowan recognized it for what it was, her setting a boundary he had to respect. Okay, he said, I'll give you space, real space. But Lydia, if you ever want to talk, if you ever need anything, I'm here. Not waiting, just here. She nodded, started back down the trail. Rowan watched her go, and this time he didn't follow. The next 2 months were the hardest of Rowan's life, not because of physical hardship, though learning blacksmithing with injuries was its own kind of torture, but because of the emotional discipline required to actually let go. He stopped writing to Lydia, stopped showing up places he knew she'd be, stopped asking mutual acquaintances how she was doing. It felt like ripping off a limb, this deliberate distance. But he'd promised her space, and he'd meant it. Instead, he focused on the life he'd told her he was building, worked with the blacksmith until his hands were covered in burns and calluses, joined the town council and actually contributed ideas instead of trying to run things, started teaching basic estate management at the school. Turned out frontier kids needed to know about resource allocation and long-term planning just as much as ranch hands did. He made friends, actual friends, not just business connections. Davis from the Mercantile became a regular dinner companion. Porter's wife, Margaret, recruited him for the community literacy program. Mrs. Fletcher started saving him the good coffee and occasionally joining him for breakfast conversations that had nothing to do with Lydia. And slowly, painfully, Rowan started to understand what it meant to have a life that mattered for its own sake. Marcus visited twice more, each time with updates that Rowan listened to with interest but didn't try to control. The estate was fine, thriving, actually. Turned out giving people autonomy and trusting them to do their jobs worked better than micromanaging everything. You planning to come back? Marcus asked on his third visit. Eventually, maybe, I don't know. Rowan poured them both coffee in the boarding house kitchen. Does it matter? To the estate? No. We've got it covered. Marcus studied him. To you? Rowan thought about it. The estate had been his identity for so long he'd forgotten there could be anything else. But now, sitting in a borrowed kitchen in a town he'd never planned to see, teaching kids about crop rotation and learning to work a forge, he wasn't sure where he belonged anymore. I don't know who I am without it, he admitted. Spent 24 years building that place. It was everything. And now? Now I'm not sure it was ever enough. I think I knew that deep down. That's why I filled every hour with work. If I stopped moving, I'd have to face how empty it all was. Marcus nodded slowly. Sarah said something similar once. Said I used work to avoid dealing with things. Took me a long time to hear her. How'd you fix it? Started going home for dinner, started actually being present when I was there, not just physically in the room, but mentally checked out. He smiled slightly. Started remembering that the work is important, but it's not everything. And the things that are everything, the people, the relationships, those need tending too. Yeah, I'm learning that. They sat in comfortable silence, two men who'd worked side by side for 12 years, finally having the kind of conversation they'd never made time for before. Winter came hard and early. By November, the town was buried in snow, and the kind of work that required being outside became impossible. Rowan found himself with more time to think than he wanted. He'd kept his promise, stayed away from Lydia, given her the space she needed. But the not knowing was its own torture. Was she okay? Was she happy? Had she met someone else? Someone who knew how to show up from the beginning instead of learning painfully late? The thought of that last one kept him up at night. It was Mrs. Fletcher who finally brought it up, finding him in the parlor at midnight nursing whiskey he wasn't really drinking. "You look miserable," she said bluntly. "I'm fine. You're sitting alone in the dark staring at nothing. That's not fine." She sat down across from him. "Want to talk about it?" "Not particularly." "Too bad. You've been moping for weeks, and it's depressing my other boarders." She fixed him with the look that had probably terrified her children into good behavior. "What's going on?" "I'm trying to give her space like she asked. Trying to live my own life. It's harder than I thought. Not knowing, not being able to fix it. You can't fix people, Rowan. Can't fix relationships like you fix a broken fence." She poured herself a small glass from his bottle. "All you can do is show up and try and hope it's enough." "What if it's not? What if I've changed and learned and become a better person, and it still doesn't matter because the damage was too deep?" "Then you'll have still changed and learned and become better. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing if I lose her anyway. That's because you're still thinking about this wrong. You didn't change for her. You changed for you. She was the catalyst, but the work, that's yours. And whether she forgives you or not, whether you end up together or not, you're still better than you were." Mrs. Fletcher drank. "Besides, who says you've lost her? She's still here, still in town. That means something." "Does it?" "Wouldn't have stayed if she didn't care at all. Could have gone anywhere. Could have disappeared completely. But she chose to build a life in the same place you're building yours. Maybe that's coincidence. Maybe it's not." Rowan wanted to believe that, wanted to read meaning into her choice to stay. But he'd spent too long lying to himself to trust his interpretation of her actions. "I don't know what to do," he said quietly. "You keep doing what you're doing. You keep showing up. You keep being someone worth knowing, and you stop trying to control how the story ends." December brought news that shifted everything. There was an accident at the Porter Ranch, a wall collapse in one of the older barns during heavy snow. 3 people injured, one of them seriously. One of them, Lydia. Rowan heard about it from Davis, who'd heard it from someone who'd been there. He was at the clinic before he consciously decided to move, his promise about space forgotten in the face of her being hurt. Dr. Chen met him at the door. "She's alive, stable, but it's bad." "How bad?" "Crushed leg, possible internal injuries." "I've done what I can, but she needs surgery I can't perform here. We're sending her to the hospital in Riverside. It's 3 hours by wagon in good weather, longer in this snow." "Can I see her?" "She's unconscious, and her family—" Chen paused. "Her father's coming. Should be here tomorrow." Rowan's stomach dropped. Lydia's father. The man who'd arranged their marriage like a business transaction and who Lydia hadn't spoken to since the wedding. The man who'd probably blame Rowan for all of this. "I need to see her," Rowan said. "Please." Chen studied him, then nodded. 5 minutes. She won't know you're there." The clinic room was small and cold despite the fire burning in the corner. Lydia lay on the bed, pale and still, her legs splinted and bandaged. There was blood on the sheets, on her clothes, too much blood. Rowan stood in the doorway, unable to move closer, because seeing her like this, broken and unconscious, made everything real in a way it hadn't been before. Made him understand how fragile everything was, how quickly it could all end. He'd spent weeks giving her space, respecting her boundaries, trying to become someone worth knowing, and now she might die without ever knowing he'd actually changed. "I'm sorry," he whispered to her unconscious form. "For everything. For all of it. You deserve so much better than what I gave you." She didn't respond, couldn't respond. The only sound was her shallow breathing and the crackle of the fire. Chen appeared in the doorway. "Time's up. We need to prep her for transport." Rowan nodded, throat too tight to speak. He started to leave, then stopped. "Dr. Chen, she's going to make it, right?" Chen's face was professionally neutral. "I don't know. The next 24 hours will tell us a lot. But I'll be honest with you. It's serious, very serious." Rowan left the clinic and walked straight into the worst snowstorm of the season. He didn't notice, didn't care, just walked until his legs gave out, until he found himself on his knees in the snow behind the church, the weight of everything finally crushing through all his defenses. He'd lost her already, lost her through his own stupidity and fear and inability to show up when it mattered. But losing her like this, losing her permanently before he could even try to make amends, that was unbearable. The storm raged around him, and Rowan Blackmoor, the man who'd built an empire on control and discipline, finally let himself break completely. Someone found him eventually. Porter, maybe, or Davis. Rowan couldn't tell through the snow and the way his body had stopped responding to commands. Strong hands pulled him upright, half carried him back to the boarding house where Mrs. Fletcher took one look at him and started issuing orders like a field marshal. Hot bath. Dry clothes. Whiskey he didn't want but drank anyway because arguing took energy he didn't have. He sat by the fire in the parlor, wrapped in blankets, and waited for news that didn't come. Porter showed up around midnight, snow melting in his beard, exhaustion written across his face. They got her loaded. Wagon left an hour ago. John Chen went with them. His daughter's the best surgeon in Riverside. Will she make it? Don't know. Margaret's praying. That's about all we can do right now. Rowan wanted to say he should have been there, should have been in that wagon, should have been doing something other than falling apart in the snow, but the words stuck in his throat. Her father's train got delayed by the storm, Porter continued. Won't be here until tomorrow afternoon at the earliest. Margaret's trying to get word to him about where Lydia is. He's going to blame me. Probably, but that's not your concern right now. Porter sat down heavily. You want to tell me what you're doing sitting here when you should be on the road to Riverside? She asked me to give her space, to let her build her own life without me hovering. And you think that applies when she's barely conscious in the back of a medical wagon? The question hit harder than it should have. Rowan stared into the fire, trying to sort through what he owed Lydia versus what his presence might cost her. Showing up could be exactly the wrong thing. Could be him reverting to type, inserting himself where he wasn't wanted, making her crisis about his feelings. Or it could be showing up when it mattered. I don't know what the right thing is, Rowan said finally. Then maybe stop trying to calculate the right thing and just do what you need to do. Porter stood. There's a wagon leaving at dawn for Riverside, supply run that got delayed by weather. Driver owes me a favor. If you want to be on it, be at the livery at 5. If you don't, that's your choice. But make it because you've thought it through, not because you're scared of getting it wrong. He left Rowan alone with the fire and the weight of the decision. Rowan didn't sleep, spent the hours until dawn pacing the room, trying to figure out what Lydia would want. What would help versus what would hurt. Whether his presence would be comfort or intrusion. By 4:30, he still didn't have an answer, but he got dressed anyway, packed a small bag, and headed for the livery. The wagon driver was a taciturn man named Webb who didn't ask questions and didn't offer conversation. They left as the sun was barely thinking about rising, the wagon loaded with supplies and Rowan's uncertainty. The roads were terrible. 3 hours in good weather became 7 hours of fighting through snow and mud and frozen ruts that threatened to break an axle every few miles. Rowan's ribs, mostly healed, protested the constant jostling. His wrist ached in the cold. None of it mattered. They reached Riverside just after 2 in the afternoon. Webb dropped him at the hospital, a surprisingly modern building that looked out of place against the frontier architecture surrounding it. Good luck, Webb said, the first words he'd spoken in 7 hours. Thanks. Inside, the hospital smelled like carbolic and something medicinal that made Rowan's stomach turn. A nurse at the desk looked up as he approached. I'm looking for Lydia Blackmore. She was brought in last night from Mercer's Crossing. The nurse checked her records. She's in surgery, has been for the last 3 hours. 3 hours. That seemed bad. Or maybe it was normal. Rowan had no frame of reference for medical procedures. How much longer? I don't know, sir. Dr. Chen will update family when she's finished. I'm her husband. The nurse's expression shifted to something more sympathetic. There's a waiting room on the 2nd floor. I'll have someone notify you when there's news. The waiting room was small, painted in institutional green that probably seemed calming to someone. Rowan sat in a chair designed for someone smaller and tried not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. He'd been there maybe an hour when the door opened and a man entered, late 50s, well-dressed despite the travel wear, with Lydia's eyes and a face that had probably been handsome before life weathered it into something harder. Lydia's father stopped when he saw Rowan. Recognition and anger crossed his face in rapid succession. Blackmore, he said, the name landing like an accusation. Rowan stood. Mr. Vale, what the hell are you doing here? Same thing you are. Waiting for news about Lydia. You have no right. Vale stopped himself, visibly controlling his anger. She left you. She told me she left you. So I'll ask again. What are you doing here? I live in Mercer's Crossing now, have for the last 3 months. And regardless of what our marriage became, she's still... Rowan stopped, trying to find words that wouldn't make this worse. I still care what happens to her. You care? Vale's laugh was bitter. You had 2 years to care. 2 years to treat my daughter like a human being instead of a piece of property you'd acquired. And now when she's finally free of you, you show up playing the concerned husband? I'm not playing anything. Then what are you doing? Vale stepped closer, and Rowan could see the fear underneath the anger, the terror of a father who might lose his daughter. She was happy. Margaret Porter told me she was building a life, making friends, finding her footing. And then you followed her like some... I didn't follow her to cause problems. I followed her because I realized too late what I'd destroyed. And yes, I'm trying to make amends, trying to be better than I was. That doesn't erase what I did, but I'm trying. Trying, Vale repeated. How convenient that you started trying after she left, after she had to walk away from everything to get your attention. The words stung because they were true. Rowan couldn't defend himself without lying, and he was done with lying. You're right, he said quietly. About all of it. Failed her, I know that, and if she wakes up and tells me to leave, I'll leave, but I needed to be here. Needed to know she was okay. Vale studied him, suspicion warring with something else on his face. If she dies because she was trying to build a new life away from you, I know. Rowan met his eyes. I know what that would mean, what it would make me, and I have to live with that. They stood in tense silence until a doctor appeared in the doorway, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and blood on her surgical gown. Family of Lydia Blackmore? Both men turned. I'm her father, Vale said. And I'm her husband, Rowan added. The doctor looked between them, clearly sensing the tension, but too professional to comment. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. Your daughter came through surgery. It was complicated. The crush injuries were extensive, but we've stabilized her for now. For now? Vale's voice cracked slightly. The next 48 hours are critical. She's developed an infection we're treating aggressively, and there's still swelling around the fracture sites. We're monitoring for complications. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. I won't lie to you. She's not out of danger, but she's alive and fighting. Can we see her? Rowan asked. She's in recovery, heavily sedated. She won't know you're there, but yes, you can see her, briefly. Chen paused. I should warn you, she looks worse than she is. The injuries are severe, and she's on multiple medications that affect her appearance. Try not to be alarmed. She led them down a hallway to a recovery room where Lydia lay surrounded by more medical equipment than Rowan had ever seen, tubes and monitors and bandages covering most of her left side. Her face was pale, peaceful in unconsciousness, but the machines beeping around her were an ominous reminder of how fragile everything was. Vale went to her immediately, taking her hand, his face crumpling in a way that made Rowan look away. That was private grief, father and daughter, and Rowan had no place in it. He stood in the doorway, keeping his distance, just needing to see that she was breathing, that she was still here. Mr. Blackmore? Chen had stayed behind when Vale went to Lydia's bedside. Can I speak with you privately? They stepped into the hallway. I understand the situation is complicated, Chen said carefully, but I need to know. If decisions need to be made about her care, who has authority? She does, Rowan said immediately. If she's conscious and can communicate, she decides. If she can't, he stopped. They'd never discussed this. Never made arrangements for emergencies because he'd been too focused on maintaining distance to plan for disasters. Her father would be next of kin, I suppose. We're separated. Are you legally divorced? No, just separated. She left. I followed. It's complicated. Chen nodded. Then technically, As her husband, you have medical authority if she's incapacitated. But given the circumstances, I'd recommend coordinating with her father, making decisions together. Of course, whatever's best for her. Good. Chen looked tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. I won't pretend to know your story, but I've seen a lot of families torn apart by medical crises. My advice? Figure out your conflicts somewhere other than her bedside. She needs people who are unified in wanting her to recover, not fighting over who has the right to be there. Just spasso. Understood. Chen left him in the hallway. Rowan could see through the window, Vale sitting beside Lydia, talking to her in a low voice she couldn't hear, his hand wrapped around hers. Rowan didn't go back in. Instead, he found a nurse and asked about nearby hotels. He spent that night in a room that smelled like dust and old dreams, lying awake staring at ceiling water stains and trying not to think about all the ways this could end badly. Trying not to calculate odds or plan for contingencies because that was the old Rowan, the one who thought control could prevent disaster. The new Rowan, the one he was still learning to be, didn't have those tools, had to sit with uncertainty, had to accept that some things were beyond his ability to fix. It was the longest night of his life. He returned to the hospital at dawn. Vale was already there, looking like he hadn't slept either. They nodded to each other, a truce born of shared fear, if nothing else. Any change? Rowan asked. No, still sedated. Dr. Chen says they'll start reducing the medication later today, see if she wakes up. That's good. That's progress. Is it? Vale slumped in his chair. I keep thinking, if I'd handled things differently, if I hadn't pushed so hard for that marriage, if I'd actually listened when she tried to tell me what she needed instead of what I thought was best. The confession hung between them. I did the same thing, Rowan said quietly. Spent 2 years thinking I knew what she needed, never asked, never listened, just assumed my version of taking care of her was enough. Vale looked at him properly for the first time. Why did you marry her? And don't tell me it was for the water rights. I know what the contract said. I'm asking what you thought you were getting into. Rowan sat down, the question forcing him to examine something he'd avoided for years. Honestly, I thought it would be simple. A partnership without all the messy emotional complications. Someone to run the house, manage the social obligations, be there without demanding too much of me. He laughed bitterly. I thought I could have a marriage without actually being married, without being vulnerable. And now? Now I understand that was the most arrogant, cowardly thing I could have done. She deserved someone who actually showed up, who saw her as a person, not a solution to a problem. But you do now? See her as a person? I'm trying to, learning to. It's harder than it should be, unlearning 43 years of emotional avoidance. Rowan rubbed his face. I know you have no reason to believe me. No, it probably looks like I'm just saying what you want to hear. But I've spent 3 months rebuilding my entire life because I finally understood what I'd lost. Vale was quiet for a long moment. Margaret Porter sent me letters, told me about you showing up in town, about the barn raising, about you working with the community instead of trying to run it. He paused. She said Lydia was conflicted, that she'd watch you sometimes when she thought no one was looking, that she'd started to believe you might actually be different. The words hit like hope and devastation mixed together. She told me she needed space. I've been trying to give her that, trying to let her build her life without me interfering. And now she's here, unconscious, and you're here, waiting. Vale's expression was unreadable. What happens if she wakes up and still doesn't want you? What then? Then I go back to Mercer's Crossing and keep building the life I started, keep becoming someone worth knowing, whether she's part of it or not. Rowan met Vale's eyes. I can't make her forgive me. Can't force reconciliation. All I can do is be better than I was and hope that's enough. That's more honest than I expected. I'm tired of lying, to myself most of all. Dr. Chen appeared mid-morning with news that they were reducing Lydia's sedation. She should start waking up over the next few hours. It'll be gradual. She'll drift in and out at first. Don't be alarmed if she's confused or doesn't recognize you immediately. That's normal. Rowan and Vale took shifts at her bedside, an awkward dance of shared space and mutual concern. When Rowan was there, he talked to her, not about their marriage or his regrets, just simple things. What was happening in Mercer's Crossing, how the Hendricks family's new barn was holding up, the way Mrs. Fletcher had started teaching him to make bread because she said his hands needed work that wasn't just destruction and repair. He didn't know if she could hear him. Didn't matter. The talking was as much for him as for her, learning to fill silence with connection instead of distance. Vale, during his shifts, read to her. Books from the hospital's small library. Poetry. The kind of things Rowan had never thought to offer during their marriage. Late afternoon on the second day, Lydia's eyes opened. Not fully awake, just a flutter, a momentary surfacing before she sank back under. But Vale saw it and called for the nurse, who called for Dr. Chen, who confirmed that yes, this was progress. Keep talking to her. Let her know she's safe. Rowan was in the cafeteria when it happened. By the time he got back to her room, Vale was there, holding her hand, tears streaming down his face as he told her she was going to be okay, that she was strong, that he was sorry for so many things. Rowan stayed in the doorway. Didn't intrude. This wasn't his moment. But then Lydia's eyes opened again, clearer this time, and she looked around the room with evident confusion. Her gaze landed on her father, then drifted past him to where Rowan stood. "Rowan?" Her voice was barely audible, roughened by the breathing tube they'd removed hours earlier. He stepped forward before he could stop himself. "I'm here." Why? The question could have meant anything. Why was he there? Why had he followed her? Why couldn't he have been this present 2 years ago? "Because I needed to make sure you were okay," he said simply. She stared at him for a long moment, something working behind her eyes that he couldn't read. Then she closed them again, exhaustion pulling her back under. "That's good," Dr. Chen said, checking monitors. "She's recognizing people, forming coherent questions, all excellent signs." Over the next day, Lydia surfaced more frequently, each time awake a little longer, a little more present. She talked to her father in quiet conversations Rowan didn't try to overhear. She asked the nurses about her injuries, took the news about her leg with a stoicism that made Rowan's chest hurt. She didn't ask to see Rowan. Didn't send him away either. He existed in a strange limbo, present but peripheral, waiting to see where he'd land in this new configuration. On the third day, Dr. Chen cleared her for visitors beyond immediate family. "Keep it brief. She's still healing, but short visits from friends should be fine." Word must have traveled fast because by afternoon, people from Mercer's Crossing started appearing. Margaret Porter, who brought flowers and gossip and made Lydia laugh despite the pain medication. Davis with books from his store. Even some of the ranch hands who'd worked alongside her, awkward and kind in equal measure. Rowan watched from the hallway as the community he'd barely known 3 months ago rallied around her. Saw how naturally she fit with them, how they treated her like family. He was preparing to leave, give her space, let her rest, when Margaret found him in the waiting room. "You planning to stand in hallways forever?" she asked. Didn't want to intrude. "She asked about you this morning, asked if you were still here." Margaret sat down beside him. "I told her yes. Told her you'd been here since the day after the accident. She didn't say much to that, but I could see her thinking, I don't want to make this harder for her." "That's very noble, also very stupid." Margaret's tone was fond despite the words. "She's been through a trauma. She's scared and hurting and trying to figure out how much of her life is going to change because of this injury. You hovering in hallways feeling guilty isn't helping anyone." "What should I do then?" "Go talk to her. Actually talk to her. Not about your marriage or your feelings or all the complicated history. Just be present. Be helpful if she needs help. Be quiet if she needs quiet. Stop trying to calculate the right move and just be a decent human being in her vicinity." It was such a Margaret thing to say, cutting through his tendency to overthink and landing on the simple truth he kept missing. "Okay," he said. "Good. Now go. She's alone right now. Vale went to get food, and the nurses are dealing with someone down the hall." Rowan found Lydia propped up in bed, staring out the window at a view of the hospital courtyard. She turned when he entered, her expression unreadable. "Hi," he said. "Hi." She gestured to the chair beside the bed. "You can sit, if you want." He sat, suddenly aware of how careful they were both being. Two people who'd been married for 2 years, navigating each other like strangers. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I got crushed by a barn," which is accurate. She shifted slightly, wincing. "Dr. Chen says I'll walk again, eventually, but it's going to be a long recovery." "I'm sorry." "Not your fault. Wall was old, should have been reinforced years ago. Just bad luck." "Still, I'm sorry you're going through this." They sat in silence for a moment, not comfortable, but not hostile either. "Margaret says you've been here since the beginning," Lydia said finally. "Yeah, I heard what happened and I had to make sure you were okay. I know you asked for space. I know showing up probably violates that, but I couldn't." He stopped, started over. "I'm sorry if me being here makes things harder." "It doesn't, or it does, but not in the way you think." She looked at him directly. "I keep trying to figure out what it means that you came. Whether it's the old Rowan trying to fix a problem or the new Rowan actually showing up because he cares, and I can't tell which one it is. Honestly, probably both. I'm still figuring out the difference myself." She almost smiled. "That's more honest than I expected." "I'm trying to be better about that. Honesty, even when it makes me look bad." "You look terrible, by the way. When's the last time you slept?" "I don't know. Tuesday?" "It's Friday." "Is it?" He rubbed his face. "I've lost track." "Rowan." Her voice was gentle in a way that made something in his chest crack. "You can't help me if you collapse. Go get some rest. Actual rest. Come back tomorrow if you want. But take care of yourself first. I don't want to leave if you need. I have nurses. I have my father. I have half of Mercer's Crossing dropping by to check on me." She paused. "What I need from you is to not destroy yourself trying to prove something. Can you do that?" It was such a simple request, such a reasonable boundary, and the fact that she was the one setting it, even from a hospital bed, even while dealing with her own crisis, that told him everything about who she was and who he'd failed to see for 2 years. "Yeah," he said. "I can do that." "Good." She closed her eyes, clearly exhausted. "Thank you for being here, for caring enough to come, even if I don't know what to do with it yet." "You don't have to do anything with it. Just focus on getting better." He left her to rest and actually went back to the hotel, actually slept for more than a few hours, actually ate something other than bad cafeteria food. And when he returned the next morning, Vale was waiting for him in the lobby. "We need to talk," Vale said. They found a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria. Vale bought them both coffee, neither of them particularly wanted. "I've been watching you," Vale said without preamble. "These last few days, the way you've been here without making demands, the way you've respected boundaries even when it clearly kills you, the way you talk to her like she's a person instead of a problem to solve. I'm trying. I can see that. And I'll be honest, it's more than I expected from you." Vale paused. "But I need to know, what are your intentions, long term, because my daughter has been through enough. If you're just going through some kind of midlife crisis guilt trip that'll fade once things settle down, I need to know now." "It's not a guilt trip. It's..." Rowan tried to find words that wouldn't sound like he was overselling his transformation. "I spent 43 years building walls and calling it strength. Lydia leaving didn't cause a crisis. It revealed one that was already there. I was empty, and I'd been empty for so long I'd forgotten what anything else felt like. And now? Now I'm trying to fill that emptiness with things that actually matter. Community, connection, work that helps instead of just accumulates. I'm trying to become someone who knows how to show up." He met Vale's eyes. "Whether Lydia takes me back or not, I'm not going back to being who I was. I can't. That person was killing me slowly, and I didn't even realize it." Vale studied him for a long moment. "I believe you, which surprises me more than I can say." "Toin it torstswegesi." He drank his coffee. "But belief isn't the same as trust. Trust has to be earned over time, through consistency, through proving that this change is permanent, not just a reaction to crisis." "I understand that." Good. Because here's what's going to happen. Lydia's recovery is going to take months, maybe longer. She'll need physical therapy, support, help with things she used to do independently. And during that time, she's going to be vulnerable in ways she's never been before. If you're serious about being different, about being someone who shows up, this is your chance to prove it. What are you asking me to do? Help her, without expecting anything in return, without keeping score or waiting for gratitude or thinking this earns you reconciliation. Vale's expression was hard. Help her because she needs it and because you're capable of providing it, not as her husband trying to win her back, but as a decent human being who cares what happens to her. I can do that. Can you? Can you really be there day after day, helping with unglamorous tasks, watching her struggle and not make it about your feelings or your redemption arc? The question forced Rowan to examine himself honestly. Could he do that? Could he show up without agenda, without expectation, without the constant calculation of whether it was working? I don't know, he said finally, but I want to try. And I'll keep trying until either I figure it out or she tells me to leave. Vale nodded slowly. That's the most honest answer you could have given. He stood. She's being transferred back to Mercer's Crossing tomorrow. Dr. Chen is arranged for continued care at the clinic there. She'll need somewhere to recover that's not the Porter Ranch. Too much chaos, too many stairs. I can arrange something. A house in town, close to the clinic. Ground floor, accessible. I'll cover it. She won't accept charity. It's not charity, it's... Rowan stopped, recognized the pattern he was falling into. You're right, she won't. So we'll figure out something she will accept. Maybe Margaret has ideas. Vale almost smiled. You're learning. Slowly, very slowly. They returned to Lydia's room together, a tentative alliance born of shared concern. She was awake, talking to Dr. Chen about transfer logistics. And you'll need to keep weight off that leg for at least 6 weeks, Chen was saying. Crutches initially, then a cane as you build strength. Physical therapy 3 times a week minimum. I can't afford that, Lydia said flatly. Your insurance? I don't have insurance. I was working at the ranch, but I hadn't been there long enough to qualify for their plan yet. The words landed like stones. Rowan's mind immediately went to solutions. He could pay, could cover everything, could make this problem disappear with money. But he caught Vale's warning look and stopped himself. There might be options, Dr. Chen said carefully. Community funds, payment plans. I'm not taking charity. Lydia's voice was firm despite the exhaustion. I'll figure something out. There's a program, Rowan said, the idea forming as he spoke. Through the town council. For residents who need medical care but can't afford it. It's funded by donations from local businesses and people who want to help but don't want recognition. It wasn't actually a program. Didn't exist yet. But it could. Rowan could fund it anonymously, set it up properly, make sure Lydia wasn't the only one who benefited. Make it real instead of just a convenient fiction. Lydia looked at him skeptically. Since when does Mercer's Crossing have that? It's new. Started about a month ago. I can put you in touch with the council representative who manages it. No charity, just a community resource for people who need it. He could see her trying to decide whether to believe him, whether to trust that this wasn't just him trying to swoop in and fix everything with money. I'll look into it, she said finally. Non-committal, but not refusing outright. Doctor. Chen finished her instructions and left them to the awkward dance of family dynamics. Vale excused himself to make phone calls, leaving Rowan alone with Lydia. That program, she said once they were alone. It's not real, is it? It will be. By the time you need to use it, it'll be completely legitimate, funded properly, available to anyone in the community who needs it, not just you. Rowan, I'm not doing this to manipulate you or buy my way back into your life. I'm doing it because it's a good idea that the town actually needs. You just gave me the push to make it happen sooner. He paused. But if you don't want to use it, that's your choice. I'll make sure there are other options. She was quiet for a long moment. You're different, really different. I keep waiting for you to slip back into the person you were, but you're not. I'm trying not to. Why? And don't say because I left or because you realized what you lost. I need to know what's driving this that won't disappear when the crisis is over. The question deserved real honesty. Rowan sat down, trying to organize thoughts he usually avoided examining too closely. I think I've been scared my whole life, he said slowly. Since my father died. Scared of being helpless, scared of losing control, scared of letting anyone close enough to hurt me. And I built this whole architecture of discipline and competence and authority to protect myself from ever feeling that vulnerable again. Did it work? No. It just made me empty. Made me into someone who had everything except anything that mattered. He looked at her directly. You leaving didn't make me scared. It made me realize I'd been terrified for 24 years and calling it strength. And once I saw that, once I really saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Couldn't go back to pretending the fortress I'd built was the same thing as a life. So what are you now, if not the fortress? I don't know yet. I'm figuring it out. Learning to be someone who connects instead of controls. Someone who shows up instead of managing from a distance. It's uncomfortable and scary, and I fail at it constantly. He managed to smile. But it's real in a way nothing else has been, and I'd rather be bad at something real than perfect at something hollow. Lydia was quiet, her eyes bright with something he couldn't name. I want to believe you. I want to believe this is permanent, but I'm terrified of trusting you and being wrong, of letting you back in and watching you revert once things get comfortable again. That's fair, more than fair. So what do we do? I don't know. What do you want to do? She laughed, the sound tired but genuine. I have no idea. My leg is destroyed, my future is uncertain, and my maybe ex-husband is sitting here being more emotionally available than he was in 2 years of marriage. I don't know how to process any of it. Then don't. Not yet. Just focus on healing. Everything else can wait. Can it? Can you wait without expectations? I'll have to learn how. Add it to the list of things I'm figuring out as I go. The conversation was interrupted by nurses coming to check vitals and administer medications. Rowan excused himself, left Lydia to rest, and went to find Porter, who was visiting with Margaret in the waiting room. I need your help, Rowan said without preamble. With? Setting up a medical assistance program for the town. Real one. Properly funded and managed. Lydia needs help with medical costs, but she won't accept it from me directly. So I'm going to make sure the help exists in a way she can accept. Porter and Margaret exchanged a look. You know she'll figure out you're behind it, Margaret said. Probably. But by then it'll be helping other people too, and she'll have to decide whether her pride is worth denying the community a resource they actually need. Porter grinned. Devious. I like it. It's not devious if it's actually helpful. Can be both, Margaret said. How much money are we talking about? Whatever it takes to make it sustainable. I'll fund the initial setup and first-year operating costs. After that, we can figure out community fundraising to keep it going. They spent the next hour working out logistics, how to structure it, who would manage it, how to make sure it served the community's actual needs instead of just being a vehicle for Rowan's guilt. By the end, it felt real. Felt like something that could actually help. You're good at this, Porter said as they finished. Building systems that work. Maybe you should have been doing this kind of thing all along instead of just accumulating land and cattle. Maybe. I'm learning there's more than one way to build something that matters. Lydia was transferred back to Mercer's Crossing the next day. The journey was brutal, every bump in the road visible in the way she gritted her teeth against pain. But she made it, and by afternoon she was settled in a small house Margaret had arranged, ground floor, close to the clinic, borrowed from a family who'd moved temporarily for work. Rowan helped with the move, carrying boxes and arranging furniture under Margaret's direction. Lydia watched from a chair, clearly frustrated by her inability to help. I hate this, she said as Rowan adjusted a bookshelf for the third time. Being helpless. Having people do everything for me. You're not helpless, you're injured. There's a difference. Doesn't feel different. I know, but it is. He stepped back from the bookshelf. How's that? Fine. Good. Whatever. She slumped in the chair. Thank you for helping. I know it's not what you signed up for when you followed me here. I didn't sign up for anything. I'm just showing up, that's all. Margaret appeared with tea and determination. All right, you two, ground rules. Lydia, you're going to need help for the next few weeks. Getting to appointments, managing daily tasks, all of it. We've set up a rotation of people from town who'll check in. But Rowan's also offered to help. And before you get all prickly about it, hear me out. Lydia's expression was already closing off. Margaret, he's not doing it as your husband. He's doing it as someone who lives here and has time and capability to help, same as any of us would. And you're going to let him because you need the help and because turning down assistance out of pride is stupid. Margaret's tone was fond but firm. Clear? I don't need... Yes, you do. Your leg is held together with pins and hope. You can't drive. You can barely walk. And the physical therapy is going to be brutal. So you're going to accept help from people who care about you, including Rowan. And you're going to focus on healing instead of trying to be independent before you're ready. Lydia looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion and pain won out. Fine, but I'm keeping track. I'll pay everyone back once I can work again. Sure you will, Margaret said in a tone that suggested she had no intention of accepting repayment. Now, Rowan's going to come by tomorrow morning to drive you to your first physical therapy appointment. Be ready at 8. She left before either of them could protest. Rowan and Lydia sat in awkward silence. You don't have to do this, Lydia said finally. I know. I want to. Why? Because you need help and I can provide it. It's not complicated. Everything between us is complicated. Yeah, but maybe helping you doesn't have to be part of that. Maybe it can just be simple. You need a ride. I have a wagon. That's it. She studied him, trying to find the catch. What do you get out of it? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. He sat down across from her. I get to be useful. I get to show up for someone who matters. I get to learn how to help without trying to control the situation. That's not nothing, but it's also not a transaction. I'm not keeping score. You say that now. Yeah, I do. Ask me again in a month and see if I'm still saying it. Despite everything, she almost smiled. You're really different? I'm really trying to be. The next morning, Rowan showed up at 8 sharp with a wagon he'd borrowed and modified. Extra padding, handholds Lydia could use to climb in without putting weight on her injured leg. Small things that made the difference between impossible and merely difficult. The physical therapy session was brutal to witness. Rowan stayed in the waiting room, but he could hear Lydia's sharp intakes of breath, the therapist's encouraging voice, the sound of someone pushing through pain that would have made most people quit. She emerged an hour later, pale and shaking, leaning heavily on crutches. That was hell, she said. I heard. Next appointment is in 2 days, same time. I'll be here. They developed a routine. 3 times a week, Rowan drove her to therapy, waited, drove her home. Sometimes they talked during the drives, small things, nothing heavy. Sometimes they rode in silence. He never pushed for more. Other days, he'd stop by with groceries or books or just to check if she needed anything. Margaret had set up the rotation as promised, but Rowan found himself taking more shifts than necessary. Not because he felt obligated, but because he wanted to. Lydia was teaching him things without meaning to, how to be helpful without being overbearing, how to show up consistently without expecting recognition, how to sit with someone's pain without trying to fix it. 5 weeks into her recovery, she had a bad day. The kind where the pain was worse, the progress felt non-existent, and the future looked like an endless stretch of limitation and struggle. Rowan found her crying on her porch, crutches lying beside her like abandoned weapons. Hey, he said quietly. Bad session? Worst one yet. Therapist says I'm plateauing, that I might not get back full mobility. She wiped her eyes roughly. I know I should be grateful I can walk at all. I know it could have been so much worse. But I'm so tired of hurting, of struggling, of feeling like my body betrayed me. He sat down beside her, not touching, just present. I'm sorry. Not your fault? Still sorry you're going through it. They sat in silence for a while. Then Lydia said, Why are you really here, Rowan? And don't give me the line about just helping. We both know it's more than that. Because watching you fight through this, watching you show up day after day, even when it hurts, even when progress is invisible, It's teaching me what real strength looks like, and I want to be here for it, want to learn from it. I'm not your inspiration. No, but you're showing me what it means to keep going when everything in you wants to quit, and that's worth witnessing. She turned to look at him, really look at him. You've changed so much I barely recognize you sometimes. Is that good or bad? I don't know yet. Ask me when I figure it out. But she didn't send him away, and when he came back 2 days later for the next appointment, she was ready. The medical assistance program launched 6 weeks after Lydia's accident. Porter stood up at a town council meeting and announced it. A fund to help community members with medical costs, funded by anonymous donors and managed by a committee of local residents. Lydia was in the audience, still on crutches but mobile. When the announcement was made, she looked directly at Rowan. He met her eyes. Didn't deny it. Didn't confirm it either. Just let her draw her own conclusions. After the meeting, she cornered him outside. This was you. This was a community need that I helped address. It wasn't about you specifically. But I'm the reason it exists now instead of some hypothetical future. Maybe. Does that change whether you'll use it? She was quiet for a moment. I already applied. Margaret helped me with the paperwork. The committee approved my request yesterday. Good. That's what it's there for. Rowan. She stopped, started over. Thank you for doing this in a way I could accept, for not making it about us or about trying to buy your way back into my life. You're welcome. But you should know this doesn't change things between us. Doesn't mean I'm ready to try again or that I've forgiven everything or that we're suddenly okay. I know. That's not why I did it. Then why did you? He thought about how to answer that honestly. Because I'm learning that showing up for people isn't about what you get in return. It's about who you become in the process. And I'd rather become someone who helps than someone who watches from a distance, calculating whether it's worth the investment. Something shifted in her expression. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. Like she was finally believing that the change was real. I need to go, she said. Therapy appointment in the morning. Need to rest. Do you want a ride? She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I'd appreciate that. It was the first time she'd accepted his help without Margaret or someone else arranging it. The first time she'd chosen to let him show up. Small victory, fragile, but real. And as Rowan drove her home through streets he'd learned to call familiar, he understood what Vale had meant about trust being earned over time. This wasn't the end of their story, wasn't even close to resolution, but it was a beginning he could work with. The progression was slow enough that Rowan almost didn't notice it happening. Lydia accepting rides became Lydia asking him to stay for coffee after appointments. Coffee became conversations that lasted past dark. Conversations became her calling him when she needed something instead of waiting for him to offer. Not reconciliation. Not yet. Just the careful reconstruction of something that might eventually look like trust. Spring came grudgingly to the territory, snow melting into mud that made every road a struggle. Lydia's physical therapy continued 3 times a week, each session a battle she fought with the kind of determination that reminded Rowan why he'd been so catastrophically wrong about her. She wasn't quiet because she was weak. She was quiet because she was saving her energy for things that mattered. Therapist says I can start working again, she told him one morning as they drove to her appointment. Limited capacity, desk work mostly, but it's progress. That's good. What are you thinking? Margaret offered me bookkeeping at the ranch again, but I don't know if I want to go back there. Too many memories of the accident. Mom, that's... She paused. Porter mentioned the town needs someone to manage community records, births, deaths, property transfers, all the administrative things that have been piling up since the last clerk retired. Sounds perfect for you. Detail-oriented, important work. Yeah, I think I'm going to apply. She looked at him. What about you? You planning to stay here permanently, or is this just extended exile until I make a decision about us? The question was direct in a way that would have made him deflect 6 months ago. Now he just answered honestly. I don't know. The estate still exists, still needs oversight eventually, but I'm not the same person who built it, and I don't know if I can go back to running it the way I used to. What would you do instead? Marcus has been talking about a partnership structure, him handling day-to-day operations, me consulting on strategy and long-term planning. Less control, more collaboration. It'd mean I could split time between there and here. Here, Lydia repeated, as in Mercer's Crossing. Yeah, I've built a life here, people I care about, work that matters. I don't want to abandon that, regardless of what happens between us. She was quiet for a long moment. That scares me. Why? Because it means you're not just waiting for me anymore. You're actually living. And if I decide I'm not ready, if I never get ready, you'll be okay. You won't need me to make your life mean something. Is that a problem? I don't know. Part of me wants you to need me, wants to know I matter enough that losing me would destroy you. She laughed bitterly, which is incredibly unhealthy now that I say it out loud. You do matter, just not in the way you're describing. You matter because you're you, not because I need you to complete me or give my life purpose. He navigated around a particularly deep rut. I spent 2 years making you responsible for filling holes in my life I didn't even acknowledge existed. I won't do that again. Can't build something real on that foundation. So what are we building, if not a reconciliation and not separate lives? I don't know, something new, maybe. Something that doesn't have a name yet. The therapy session was particularly brutal that day. Lydia emerged looking wrecked, and instead of going straight home, she asked Rowan to drive her to the ridge behind the church, the one where they'd had that devastating conversation months ago. They sat on the same rock, looking at the same view, but everything felt different. I've been thinking about forgiveness, Lydia said. What it means, whether I'm capable of it. And I think I've been confusing forgiveness with forgetting, like I can't forgive you unless I stop remembering how much you hurt me. But that's not how it works, is it? The hurt is part of what happened, part of who we both are now. No, it doesn't work that way. So maybe forgiveness is just choosing to stop letting the hurt define everything, choosing to see who you are now instead of only seeing who you were. She pulled her coat tighter. I'm not there yet, but I think I'm getting closer. Rowan felt something shift in his chest. Hope, maybe, or just the acknowledgement that they were both trying. Take whatever time you need. What if I need forever? Then I'll be here forever, building my life, showing up for you if you want me to, giving you space if you don't. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, doesn't it? Can we really exist in this middle ground indefinitely? I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. She turned to look at him, really look at him, and something in her expression cracked open. I'm scared, Rowan. I'm scared of trusting you again. Scared of what happens if I do and you revert. Scared of what happens if I don't and I lose you permanently. Just scared all the time. Me too. You are. Terrified. Every day that I'll screw this up, that I'm not actually changing, just performing change, that I'll hurt you again in some new way I haven't even thought of yet. He paused. But being scared doesn't mean stopping. It just means being honest about the fear while you keep moving forward. When did you get wise? I'm not wise. I'm just finally paying attention. They sat in silence as the sun moved lower, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. Finally, Lydia said, I got a letter from my father. He's coming to visit next month. Wants to see how I'm doing. How do you feel about that? Complicated. He's been better since the accident, more present, more honest. But there's still so much we haven't addressed, so much history. She hesitated. He asked if you'd be around when he visits, said he wanted to talk to both of us. What did you tell him? That I'd ask you, that I couldn't speak for what you'd want. I'll be here if you want me to be, if it would help. Even though he'll probably grill you about your intentions and whether you're actually different. Especially then, he has every right to be skeptical. And honestly, being held accountable by someone who cares about you, that's not a bad thing. Lydia smiled slightly. You really are different. I'm really trying to be. Vale arrived on a Tuesday, looking older than Rowan remembered, but steadier somehow, less rigid. He embraced Lydia carefully, mindful of her injuries, then turned to Rowan with an expression that was more thoughtful than hostile. Blackmore, he said. Mr. Vale. I think we're past that. Call me Richard. They had dinner at the boarding house. Mrs. Fletcher outdid herself, sensing the importance of the occasion. The conversation was careful at first, dancing around the complicated history, but gradually found steadier ground. Margaret's been sending me updates, Richard said, looking at Lydia. Says you're doing well with the recovery, better than expected. Some days, other days I want to throw my crutches off a cliff. That's my daughter, stubborn to the end. He turned to Rowan. And you. I hear you've made yourself useful around here. I've tried. More than tried, from what I hear. The medical fund, the barn raising, teaching at the school. You've become part of the community. Richard's tone was neutral, but Rowan could hear the assessment underneath. That's not easy for someone like you, someone used to being in charge. It's been an adjustment, but a necessary one. Why necessary? The question felt like a test. Rowan chose honesty, because being in charge kept me isolated, kept me from actually connecting with anyone, and I'd rather be a useful part of something than the sole authority of nothing that matters. Richard nodded slowly. I owe you an apology for pushing Lydia into a marriage that was fundamentally unequal, for thinking water rights and financial security were more important than emotional compatibility, for treating my daughter like a chess piece instead of a person. Lydia's eyes widened. Dad, let me finish. I've had a lot of time to think about this, about the mistakes I made, and I need you to know I'm sorry. You deserved better from me. You were trying to protect me. I was trying to control a situation I was scared of losing control over. There's a difference. He looked between them. You're both doing that now, learning the difference between protection and control, between love and possession. It's hard work. I should know. Took your mother leaving me to figure it out. Mom left you? Lydia's voice was shocked. For 6 months, 20 years ago, said she couldn't be married to someone who treated her like property. Richard smiled sadly. She came back eventually, but only after I proved I could be different, that I could be a partner instead of a manager. The revelation hung in the air. Rowan found himself reassessing everything he'd assumed about Vale's marriage, about what made relationships work or fail. I didn't know that, Lydia said quietly. We didn't advertise it, but it happened. And it taught me that love without respect is just another form of control, that you can't build a life with someone you won't listen to. Richard looked at Rowan directly. Which is why I'm here, to see if you've actually learned that lesson, or if you're just going through the motions until my daughter takes you back. I don't expect her to take me back, Rowan said. That's not why I'm here, not anymore. Then why are you here? Because I'm learning how to be someone worth knowing. Whether Lydia's part of that or not, the work matters. The change matters. And if she decides she wants nothing to do with me, I'll be disappointed. Heartbroken, probably, but I'll still be better than I was. Richard studied him for a long moment, then turned to Lydia. What do you think? I think, she paused, choosing words carefully. I think he means it. I think the change is real, but I also think 6 months doesn't erase 2 years of damage, and I don't know if I'm ready to risk trusting him again. That's fair? But I also think, she stopped, started over. I think I want to try, not to go back to what we were, that's dead and buried, but to see if we can build something new, something that actually works. Rowan's heart did something complicated. Hope and terror and gratitude all tangled together. You're sure? He asked. No, but I'm tired of being paralyzed by uncertainty, so I'm choosing to try and see what happens. What would that look like, trying? I don't know. Maybe we start with actual dates, getting to know each other without all the weight of marriage and history crushing everything. Maybe we court like we should have from the beginning. I can do that. Can you? Can you actually be patient with a slow rebuild instead of trying to rush to some predetermined destination? Yes, I've learned patience, among other things. Richard cleared his throat. I'm going to excuse myself. This feels like a conversation you two should have alone. He left them in the parlor with coffee going cold and years of complexity to untangle. So, Lydia said, dates. Dates, well, Rowan agreed. Where would you want to go? I don't know, somewhere I can actually manage with these. She gestured to her crutches. Maybe the library, or just walks around town when the weather's decent. Nothing fancy, just time together without agenda. I can do that. And we take it slow, no moving back in together, no grand gestures. Just getting to know each other like we're starting fresh. Agreed. She looked at him, vulnerability clear on her face. I need you to understand something. I'm not promising this works out. I'm not promising I'll ever fully trust you again or that we'll end up back together. I'm just promising to try. That's more than I deserve. Maybe, but it's what I'm offering. She paused. Can you live with that uncertainty? Rowan thought about the months he'd spent in limbo, learning to exist without knowing how things would end, learning to value the process instead of just the outcome. Yeah, he said. I can live with that. Their first actual date was a disaster. Rowan had planned a picnic, forgetting that Lydia's mobility issues made sitting on the ground nearly impossible. She'd laughed at his chagrin, and they'd ended up eating sandwiches on a bench outside the Mercantile while Davis made unhelpful commentary through the window. The second date was better. A visit to the library where they talked about books they'd read, discovering they had almost nothing in common taste-wise but enjoyed arguing about it. The third date was just a walk around town at sunset, Lydia setting the pace with her crutches, Rowan matching her stride and learning to be comfortable with silence that wasn't weighted with expectations. Slowly, carefully, they built something that looked like friendship first, then maybe something more. 2 months into this careful reconstruction, Marcus showed up with news from the estate. We've got a problem, he said without preamble. The Eastern timber contracts are being challenged, legal dispute over water rights and logging access. It's complicated, and the lawyers say we need you there to sort it out. Rowan's first instinct was to refuse, to say he was needed here, that someone else could handle it, but he'd learned enough to recognize when he was avoiding responsibility versus setting boundaries. How long? He asked. Week, maybe 2. It's messy. Let me talk to Lydia. He found her at the town clerk's office where she'd started working part-time. She looked up from a ledger, smiled when she saw him, and Rowan felt the now familiar twist of hope and fear that accompanied every interaction. Hey, what's wrong? How do you know something's wrong? You have your preparing for difficult conversation face. I've learned to recognize it. She set down her pen. What's going on? He explained the situation, the legal issues, the need to return to the estate temporarily to sort things out. So go, she said simply. Just like that? Rowan, it's your business, your responsibility. I'm not going to ask you to abandon it because we're trying to figure out what we are. I don't want you to think I'm running away. I don't. I think you're handling something that needs handling. That's different. She paused. But I need you to understand. This is part of what I'm watching for. Whether you can exist in both worlds without losing yourself in either one. Whether you've actually learned balance or just transferred your obsession from the estate to me. That's fair. So go. Deal with your legal mess. Come back when it's handled. I'll be here. You're sure? No. But I'm trusting you anyway. That's what this is. Choosing to trust even when I'm not sure. Rowan left for the estate 3 days later. The place looked the same but felt different. Or maybe he felt different, and it changed how he saw everything. The grand house seemed excessive. The sprawling operations seemed hollow without people to share them with. Marcus met him in the office, and they dove into the legal mess immediately. 3 days of meetings with lawyers, reviewing contracts, negotiating with the opposing party. Exhausting work that Rowan handled with competence born of decades of experience. But he also noticed something new. He wasn't getting lost in it. Wasn't using work to avoid thinking about everything else. When the meetings ended, he went to his room and wrote to Lydia about his day. Not about the legal issues specifically, but about how strange it felt to be back in a place that used to be his entire world and now felt like just another location. Her responses came every few days, brief updates about life in Mercer's Crossing. The medical fund had helped 3 more families. The spring thaw had turned the roads to soup. Mrs. Fletcher's cat had kittens and was terrorizing the boarding house. Small things, normal things, the kind of mundane details that built a life. The legal dispute resolved after 10 days, faster than expected because Rowan was willing to compromise in ways the old version of himself never would have. He signed agreements that gave up some control in exchange for stable partnerships, arranged management structures that didn't require his constant presence. "You're different," Marcus said as they finalized paperwork. "More flexible, less controlling?" "I was going to say rigid, but yeah." Marcus smiled. "It's good. Sarah says the same thing, says you seem lighter somehow." "I feel lighter, like I've been carrying weight I didn't need to carry." "You planning to come back? Long term, I mean." Rowan thought about it, really thought about it instead of just reacting. "I don't know. Part of me will always be connected to this place, but I've built something in Mercer's Crossing that matters in a different way. I think I need both. Need to figure out how to be present in both places without losing myself in either one." "That sounds healthy, also complicated." "Yeah, but I'm learning that healthy and complicated go together more often than not." He returned to Mercer's Crossing on a Tuesday afternoon, wagon loaded with supplies and gifts for people who'd become friends. Mrs. Fletcher got fancy coffee. Davis got books for his store. The Porters got tools for the ranch. Lydia got a letter he'd written during the trip back, trying to explain what he'd learned about himself in those 10 days away. He found her at the clerk's office, filing documents with the kind of meticulous care she brought to everything. She looked up when he entered, and her face did something complicated, relief and wariness and something else he couldn't name. "You're back," she said. "I'm back. Is that okay?" "Yeah, it's okay." She set down the papers. "How did it go?" "Resolved, mostly. There'll be ongoing negotiations, but the immediate crisis is handled." "And how do you feel about it? Being back there, dealing with all of that?" "Strange. Like visiting a place I used to live but don't anymore. It's still important, but it's not everything like it used to be." Lydia nodded slowly. "That's growth. Is it enough?" "Enough for what?" "For you to believe I've actually changed, that this is permanent." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Can we go somewhere? I need to show you something." They walked to her small house, Lydia's mobility noticeably better than when he'd left. Inside, she led him to the kitchen table where papers were spread out, sketches and plans and notes in her careful handwriting. "I've been thinking about the future," she said, "about what I want, what I need, and I realized I've been so focused on whether to trust you that I haven't been honest about what I'd need if we actually tried to make this work." "Okay, what do you need?" "I need equality, real equality. Not you managing things and me going along, not me having to fight for every inch of consideration. Actual partnership where we make decisions together and both of our opinions matter." "I can do that." "Can you?" "Because it means letting go of control. It means compromise even when you're sure you're right. It means sometimes doing things my way instead of the optimal way." "I understand. I also need independence. I need my own work, my own space, my own life that isn't just an extension of yours. I need to know I can stand on my own, so I'm choosing to be with you, not dependent on you." "That makes sense." "And I need—" She stopped, took a breath. "I need you to talk to me. Really talk. Not just surface-level pleasantries, but actual thoughts and feelings and fears. I need to know what's going on in your head instead of having to guess. I can do that. I'm doing that. Or trying to." "I know, and that's why I think—" She gestured at the papers. "I think maybe we try this. Really try. Not just dating, actually working toward building something together." Rowan looked at the sketches spread across the table, floor plans for a house, lists of features, notes about accessibility and shared spaces and separate work areas. Plans for a future neither of them was sure they'd have, but both were willing to risk building. "You designed a house," he said. "A house that could work for both of us, if we decide that's what we want. Ground floor, accessible for my leg, office spaces for both of us, garden area, close to town but with some land." She looked at him nervously. "It's just ideas. Not a commitment, just possibilities." "It's beautiful." You think so? I think it shows you've been thinking about a future that includes me, and that's... His voice caught. That's more than I thought I'd get. It includes you, but it also includes me being whole and independent. It includes us being partners, not you being in charge and me being along for the ride. I wouldn't want it any other way. You say that now, but when we disagree about something important, when I want to do something you think is wrong, will you still be able to respect my choice? I don't know, Rowan said honestly. I hope so, but I've spent 43 years being controlling. It's not going to disappear overnight. I'll probably screw up. Probably revert to type sometimes. But I'll try to catch myself. And I'll listen when you call me on it. That's all I can ask for. They spent the afternoon talking about possibilities, about what a shared life might look like, about how to split time between Mercer's Crossing and the estate, about building something that honored both of their needs instead of just one person's vision. It wasn't romantic, wasn't some grand declaration, just two people having an honest conversation about logistics and expectations and hopes. But somehow, that made it more real. A week later, disaster struck in the form of a late spring storm that hit the territory harder than anyone expected. 3 days of rain that turned creeks into rivers and rivers into floods. The town mobilized immediately, sandbagging low-lying areas, evacuating families, coordinating rescue efforts. Rowan found himself working alongside Porter and Davis and dozens of others, hauling supplies, reinforcing barriers, helping people to safety. Exhausting work that didn't stop even when his body was screaming for rest. On the second day, word came that the Hendricks family, the same family whose barn they'd rebuilt months ago, was trapped in their house. Water rising, road washed out. No way to reach them with standard wagons. We need someone who knows the back trails, Porter said. Someone who can navigate rough terrain. Rowan knew those trails. Knew them from hunting trips years ago, from the obsessive way he'd mapped every inch of his territory. I can do it. It's dangerous. Water's unpredictable. I know, but they need help. He set out with 2 others, young men from town who were strong and capable but didn't know the terrain. The ride was brutal, navigating flooded paths and fallen trees, the horses struggling through mud that threatened to trap them. They reached the Hendricks place as water was lapping at the porch. Got the family loaded, Thomas, his wife, their 3 kids, and started back. The route that had been barely passable an hour ago was now completely flooded. Rowan had to navigate by memory and instinct, finding higher ground that wouldn't collapse, avoiding areas where currents could sweep them away. They were maybe a mile from safety when Rowan's horse lost its footing, went down hard in water that was moving faster than it looked. Rowan kicked free, went under, came up gasping as the current grabbed him. He could swim. Had always been a strong swimmer, but the water was cold and fast and full of debris, and his body was exhausted from days of crisis management. He was going to die here. After everything. After finally learning how to show up. After finally becoming someone worth being. He was going to drown in a flash flood because he'd volunteered for a rescue mission. The irony would have been funny if he wasn't choking on muddy water. Strong hands grabbed him, pulled him toward solid ground. Porter and Davis, who'd come looking when the rescue party didn't return on schedule. They dragged him to the bank, where he coughed up what felt like half the river. "You idiot," Porter said, and it sounded like affection. "You complete idiot. Did the family? They're safe. The other 2 got them to town. You almost died for nothing." Wasn't for nothing. They needed help. And we needed you to not be a hero and get yourself killed. But Porter was smiling even as he said it. "Come on, let's get you back before Lydia hears about this and kills you herself." They got him back to town, where Dr. Chen checked him over and pronounced him exhausted but intact, and where Lydia was waiting, her face white with fear and fury. "You almost died," she said. "I'm okay." "You almost died," she repeated louder. "I heard the reports. Heard you went under and they thought you were gone. I thought..." Her voice broke. "I thought I'd lost you after everything, after all the work and the trying and the building towards something. I thought I'd lost you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. You don't get to do that. Don't get to risk yourself like you're expendable, like losing you wouldn't matter." She was crying now, angry tears. "You matter, you idiot. You matter to this town and to the people here and to me. And I can't lose you now that I've finally let myself care again." The words hit like a revelation, like permission. "You care," Rowan said softly. "Of course I care. I've been trying not to, trying to protect myself, but I care. I care so much it terrifies me." He reached for her hand. She let him take it. "I'm sorry. You're right. I was being stupid, trying to prove something." "What were you trying to prove?" "That I'm the kind of person who shows up, who helps. But I forgot that showing up also means staying alive to be there tomorrow." "Yeah, it does." She squeezed his hand. "Don't do that again. Don't make me go through thinking you're dead. I can't handle that. I won't. I promise." They sat together while the town continued coordinating flood relief around them, and Rowan understood something fundamental. This was love. Not the grand gestures or the dramatic rescues, but the fear of loss, the choice to care even when it was terrifying, the decision to show up day after day, building something that mattered with someone who mattered. The flood receded over the next week. Damage was extensive but manageable. The community pulled together the way frontier towns did, everyone helping everyone, and Rowan found himself in the middle of it instead of directing from above. 3 weeks after the flood, Lydia asked him to go for a walk. They ended up at the ridge behind the church again, their place now apparently, for important conversations. "I've been thinking," she said, "about us, about the future, about what I want." "Okay." "And I think I want to try, actually try, not just dating, but building towards something real." "Marriage?" "Eventually, maybe, if we can do it right this time, as equals, as partners." She turned to face him. "But I need to know you're in this for the right reasons, not because you feel guilty or because you're trying to fix the past, but because you actually want a life with me, with who I am now, not who you wanted me to be." "I want a life with you," Rowan said. "The real you. The one who's stubborn and independent and won't let me get away with anything. The one who bakes bread at 2 in the morning and transforms dead gardens and keeps fighting even when everything hurts. That's who I want. That's who I've wanted since I was too stupid to see what was right in front of me." "You're sure?" "I'm terrified, but I'm sure." She smiled, and it was the first completely open smile he'd seen from her in years. "Good, because I'm terrified too, but I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions. So what now?" "Now we build something new, not trying to recreate what we had, building something better from the ground up." "I can do that." "You better, because I'm not going through this again. This is it. Last chance for both of us to get it right." "I understand." She kissed him then, and it felt like coming home and starting over at the same time. Like every mistake and every lesson and every moment of growth had led to this. 2 broken people choosing to risk being broken again in service of something real. They built the house from Lydia's designs. Rowan handled logistics and construction management, but Lydia made the decisions about layout and features and everything that mattered. True partnership that meant he sometimes bit his tongue when he disagreed and learned to trust her vision instead of just defaulting to his own. The garden was Lydia's domain entirely. She transformed the land around the house the same way she'd transformed the dead space at the estate, with patience and persistence and an understanding of how to nurture growth. Rowan split his time between Mercer's Crossing and the estate, the partnership with Marcus working better than he'd expected. Turned out delegating authority to someone competent and trusting them to do their job was both effective and liberating. He taught more at the school, got involved in town council work, became part of the community's fabric instead of just an outsider trying to earn his way in. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, he and Lydia built something that looked like a marriage. Not perfect. They fought sometimes, real fights, where they both said things that hurt and had to apologize and mean it. But they fought as equals, and they always came back to each other. 1 year after the flood, they stood in the garden behind their house, the house they'd built together, and Lydia said, "I want to renew our vows." "You do?" The first wedding was about business contracts and water rights, and 2 people who didn't know each other. "I want one that's about us, about choosing each other with full knowledge of what that means. When? Spring, when the garden's in full bloom, small ceremony, just the people who matter. I'd like that. The ceremony was nothing like their first wedding. Lydia wore blue instead of gray. Rowan wrote vows that actually meant something instead of repeating traditional words he didn't feel. Their friends from town bore witness. Porter and Margaret, Davis, Mrs. Fletcher, Dr. Chen, the Hendricks family, Richard Vale with tears in his eyes. I can't promise I won't mess up, Rowan said, holding Lydia's hands while the spring sun painted everything gold. Can't promise I won't revert to old patterns or hurt you in new ways I haven't thought of yet. But I can promise I'll keep trying, keep showing up, keep choosing you and choosing us, and choosing to be better than I was, every day, for the rest of my life. I can't promise I'll always trust you, Lydia replied. Can't promise the hurt is completely healed or that I won't be scared sometimes, but I can promise to keep choosing to trust anyway, to keep building this life with you, to keep being your partner instead of your property, every day, for as long as we both shall live. They sealed it with a kiss that tasted like hope and hard-won wisdom, like two people who'd walked through fire and come out knowing what mattered. The reception was loud and joyful and full of people celebrating not just a wedding, but a transformation. Marcus gave a toast about watching his boss become human. Margaret cried happy tears and pretended she wasn't. Richard pulled Rowan aside and said, "You did it. You actually did it. Became someone worthy of my daughter." "I'm still working on it," Rowan admitted. "We all are. That's the point." Late in the evening, Rowan found Lydia alone on the porch, looking at the garden she'd built from nothing. "Happy?" he asked. "Yeah, actually happy. Not just content or okay, actually happy." She looked at him. "You?" Terrified and happy in equal measure, which seems about right. "It does, doesn't it?" She took his hand. "Come on, let's go inside, our house, our life, our second chance that we earned the hard way." They walked inside together, leaving the party to wind down on its own. And Rowan thought about how far they'd both come, from a marriage that was a frozen fortress to this warm, messy, beautiful thing they'd built from ruins. It wasn't perfect, would never be perfect, but it was real. It was theirs, and that was enough, more than enough, everything.